Chapter 176, Korin vs the Rokubai. As soon as Ryo approached the Rokubai, he felt great threat, and his body unconsciously entered ice elementization. At that exact moment, a fist wrapped in Biju chakra directly went through Ryo's heart. A Biju's chakra is so destructive, and the punch was able to split Ryo's upper body. He was in cold sweat, frightened by this punch. If it wasn't for his intuition, and his timely elementization, Ryo would have been killed by this fist. He quickly moved back to his initial spot, opening the yin seal and releasing enough natural energy for his torso to self-repair. He then opened his Mangekyo to observe the situation in the Rokubai Jinchuriki's body. With that, he made sure that this was the Biju in control, not its Jinchuriki. Usually, once a Jinchuriki is dead, his Biju should follow, and this situation made Ryo really puzzled. Didn't he just kill the Rokubai Jinchuriki? Ryo was stunned for a moment, and quickly returned to the ice world. After quick observation, he determined that the Jinchuriki's consciousness still had subtle fluctuations and did not completely dissipate. Ryo wanted to destroy his consciousness immediately, but was stopped by Korin. "Korin, do you want to fight the Rokubai?" Ryo communicated with her. "Well, I want to see if I'm as strong," Korin said with some hope. Ryo did not object, and agreed with her request. On the Rokubai's side, a massive flow of chakra began to ooze out of the Jinchuriki's body, and it condensed gradually into a behemoth that's covered within a thick, slimy substance. Korin wasn't willing to show weakness. She retrieved her chakra from within Ryo's seal, and in the blink of an eye, a mighty water kirin appeared. The Rokubai felt quite restless as it observed Korin. Her single smaller tail indicated that she wasn't a Biju. But he could sense that she was one. Korin's chakra was equivalent to that of the Yonbai, but she had a single tail. Usually, a Biju's number of tails indicated his amount of chakra, but Korin did not follow this law, making Seiken uncertain. The Rokubai was quite simple-minded, whatever it didn't understand would be put aside, with it proceeding directly to attack. Korin saw this and began to condense a Biju Dhamma. With Seiken's chakra being absolutely above hers, it also went for the simplest crudest attack method, and answered with a Biju Dhamma of its own. The collision between Korin's and the Rokubai's Biju Dhamma should be equivalent to the one between a Raisin Shuriken against a regular Biju Dhamma. The two attacks collided in midair, and Korin's Biju Dhamma had higher overall energy level, but its chakra was far below the Rokubai's attack. In the end, Korin lost the Biju Dhamma showdown, and the Rokubai's that lost most of its power flew towards her. "Korin, water!" Ryo communicated with Korin. She shook her head reluctantly and refused Ryo's help. She jumped in the air, avoiding the remaining attack of the Rokubai. The Biju noticed from the collision that Korin's chakra contained some natural energy, and it felt more pressure. To its knowledge, none besides the Juobi should use natural energy. Why could Korin use it? It became hesitant and didn't know if it should continue the fight. Just as it was indecisive, Korin took the initiative to attack. Korin's thoughts were influenced by Ryo and his sensei, Kushina. Would they just run away in disgrace after taking a punch? Absolutely not. Therefore, Korin did not admit defeat after losing the Biju Dhamma showdown, especially after escaping it unscathed. As she was created, her soul absorbed that of the Sanbai. She had all its water-controlling capabilities, so she also resorted to water attacks. Massive sphere of water appeared around her body, and then lighting flashed within her eyes. The lightning chakra merged with the sphere, which gradually turned black, eventually becoming lavender black just like Korin's eyes. Black lightning. Ryo did not expect that Korin would not just control lightning, but also use black lightning itself. This was Darui's and the third Raikage's special technique. It was often combined with water, so that it flowed naturally like water. However, Korin's style was somewhat different than Darui's method. Her attacks are mainly based on water release, and she used the black lightning to incorporate its characteristics into them, granting them greater destructive power. Her lightning was closer to Madara's Senpo, Storm Release Light Fang. Her water sphere was launched, rushing directly to the Rokubai like lightning. Madara's attack was powerful enough to cut clean through a truth-seeking ball, and Korin's attack's destructive power was also quite amazing, and holes appeared in the Rokubai's body. Not only that, but its body was also paralyzed by the lightning's additional effects. Nevertheless, the Rokubai was a Biju, and the holes in its body were quickly restored. In the end, Korin's attack only limited its actions. The Biju could not lift the paralyzing effect of the lightning, and could only roar in place to vent its anger. Along with its roar, the mucus on its body began to turn into a bubble, and it took a deep breath and blew said bubble towards Ryo and Korin. Korin condensed a lot of water, trying to pop the bubble, but the water just integrated with the bubble. The Rokubi's mucus itself is strongly corrosive, and was able to change the water. Korin's attack turned into highly corrosive acid water. As the water now had Seiken's chakra within it, the Biju controlled the water to turn on Korin. She had no time to react, and was going to be eroded by the powerful attack. Ryo could no longer sit still, and flickered to Korin's side, freezing the acid water. Korin first breathed a sigh of relief, then screamed at Ryo, "Hey! Who asked for your help? Alright, it's my fault. I shouldn't have been so nosy." Ryo knew all too well that he should never argue with a woman. Korin felt guilty and bowed her head, admitting her fault. "You're right. This has become boring. Let's finish him together." Korin knew already that she couldn't deal with the Rokubi, but she had refused Ryo's help. She couldn't just ask for it. Now that Ryo took the initiative, she jumped on the opportunity and asked Ryo to cooperate with her. Not knowing her motives, Ryo thought that she just got bored with the fight. Finishing the Rokubi was all too easy for Ryo. He just re-entered Ice World, crushing the Rokubi's consciousness. With its Jinchuriki dead, Seiken gradually began to dissipate. Ryo moved to its side and collected one tael's worth of chakra. He then returned to Korin's side, injecting the freshly collected chakra directly into her body. Chapter 177, The Direction of Korin's Growth. With the injection of the Rokubi's chakra within it, Korin's chakra began to decompose and get reconstructed. Ryo opened his Sharingan and observed the changes happening to Korin carefully. The Rokubi's chakra gradually merged with hers, becoming part of her new chakra. Her body grew in size, and her overall amount of chakra also increased. The proportion of natural energy in it also increased. Ryo even felt dizzy from the imposing atmosphere of her new chakra. "Korin, what's your chakra nature type?" Ryo did not ask this question before, as he assumed that she only had water release. In the battle just now, not only did she use lightning, she used black lightning merging it with water, which surprised Ryo. Therefore, he felt that this question is necessary. "Chakra nature type? I have earth, water, fire, wind, and lightning," Korin said after some thought. "What? How do you have all 5 nature types?" Shan Zhongyuan heard some shock. "I've got earth release from the Ichibai, water release from the Sanbai, fire release from the Yanbai, and wind and lightning release from the Gobi," Korin explained to Ryo. T/N, to my knowledge, the Gobi was never stated to have lightning release. This, however, doesn't mean that he didn't have it. It probably just means that the author had decided to add the ability to the Gobi's known arsenal. "What did you get from the Kyubi?" asked Ryo. "The Kyubi's affinities are yin and yang. His chakra was the key to give birth to my consciousness. However, you've only injected so little of his chakra, and it got used up after that. I had no yin or yang release." Korin's tone had a hint of regret in it. T/N, the Kyubi having fire and wind release is anime only and never confirmed by a canon source. After hearing Korin, Ryo finally had a better understanding on how she was born. When the Rikudo Sennin separated the Biju from the Juobi, he used yin-yang release. In this case, the yin and yang release from Kurama merged with the Gadu Mazo's arm to create the initial brute consciousness of Korin. It was at this time that Ryo added in the Sanbai's soul, and Korin swallowed that soul to grow. The Kyubi was originally part of the Jubi, and his chakra was merging with the Gadumazu's arm. But with the lack of the Nibi's, Rokubi's, Nanabi's, and Hakubi's chakra, it could not reconstruct a true mini-Jubi. At this time, Korin's soul had grown up, taking over the arm. She also felt the power deficiency, and unconsciously began absorbing natural energy to make up for that. When absorbing natural energy, her consciousness got in touch with Ryo's, and finally under his guidance, she finally turned into what she was now. "Korin, then, do you still need some of the Kyubi's chakra to get yin and yang nature type?" "No. Just after getting the Rokubi's chakra, I felt my yang affinity began to develop. I should be able to awaken yin and yang completely by getting chakra from the remaining Biju," said Korin. Ryo nodded, as Korin's feelings coincided with his thoughts. At this point, Korin's growth direction could basically be determined. First, Ryo had to get the Nibis, Nanabis, and Haxabi's chakra to allow Korin to complete her transformation. With that, she could have yin and yang affinity, and that along with natural energy can help her become a new Juobi. Once that happened, Korin would actually surpass the Juobi with her intellect and free will. She would become equivalent to the Rikudo Sennin or Kagaya. Thinking about such possibilities, Ryo became more and more excited to witness Korin's growth. A quarter of the Rokubi's chakra was integrated into that of Korin. What was left was to take quite some time to fuse. Ryo, I need some time to integrate the Rokubi's chakra with mine, around 2 to 3 hours. Please do not bother me until I'm done with that. After finishing her words, Korin's chakra returned to Ryo, and her body and soul became a cat once again that went into Ryo's bag. Ryo carefully adjusted the position of his bag to ensure that Korin would not fall out, and then he teleported to the place where he left Pakura. Pakura on the other hand was worried about the battle between Ryo and the Mist Ninjas, and it wasn't until the Rokubi's chakra disappeared that she finally felt at ease. As she was breathing a sigh of relief, she suddenly felt someone suddenly appear behind her, and she struggled to get up from the ground, grinding through the pain to assume a fighting position. Haha! Look at you all nervous. Calm down, it's just me, Ryo said with a smile. Pakura heard Ryo's voice, helplessly pouting, throwing her kunao and sitting on the ground. Ryo Yamanaka, you know, you're going to scare someone to death if you keep jump scaring people like that. Sorry. I'm just used to it. First, I'll treat you right here. After your injuries are stable, I'll take you to your sister. After Ryo finished his words, he began using healing to treat Pakura. Ryo, you are one of Konoha's heroes. If one day, the Hokage trades your life for the benefit of the village, what would you do? Pakura's tone was a bit sad, with a hint of anger hidden within it. I would probably become a rebel. Ryo did not hesitate before answering. Then you would seek revenge from the Hokage? Pakura continued to ask. Of course, I'm not an angel, you know. Anyone who wants to harm will pay for his deeds. While Ryo knew what Pakura had encountered, his words were absolutely sincere. If the third was to change and try to hurt him, Ryo would certainly after him. After Pakura heard his answer, she did not say anything, and fell silent instead. Ryo's medical ninjutsu had improved a lot over the years. Now, he wasn't inferior to Tsunade in any way, and Pakura's injury was quickly treated by him. All this time, Pakura remained silent, until Ryo teleported with her to Shi's side. Finally seeing her sister after so many years, Pakura couldn't but burst into tears. She was in no better state, and the two hugged each other tightly. Pakura vented all her frustration and sorrow that she had gathered over the years, crying out loud out of control. She was the one to raise Pakura, and knew her better than anyone else. Seeing her sister's behavior, she knew that she had been wronged. She patted on her younger sister's back, and said nothing, just taking her to the side to cry together. After a long time, Pakura's emotions were finally stable. With her mood becoming much better, she began to talk Shi about her experiences that happened while she was out of the village. The older sister listened to her sister describing her growth and showed a happy smile. Now tell me, Pakura, has someone done you wrong recently? You can tell your sister anything you know. She said with a smile. Pakura looked at her sister's smile, and felt that it brought along warmth that spread reaching her heart. She concealed nothing, and told Shi of everything that happened. The Sand Village had suffered heavy losses after the Battle of Kikyo Pass. The surviving ninjas had no fighting spirit, and the village could no longer engage into war. While the Sand managed to sign a peace treaty with Konoha, they couldn't manage to do so with the Rock. While the Rock lost their battles as well, they were still in a much better state than the Hidden Sand. There was a possibility that the Rock and the Mist would join each other, and attack the Sand, which was the weakest village at the time, to gain something out of the war. Raza wanted to negotiate with the Mist, but they had great grudge against the Sand, especially Pakura's late father who had dealt great damage to them in the past. So, what they asked the Sand for was to hand over Pakura. Otherwise, they would join the Hidden Rock. Raza chose to compromise for the peace of the village. He told Pakura that she would go out on a mission, and had 3 ninjas accompany her. In fact, her teammates were a Quasi-Kage and 2 Jonins from the Mist. The Rokubai Jinchuriki on the other hand was outside the village, lurking in the desert, waiting to ambush her. The 4 managed to injure Pakura severely, and if it wasn't for Ryo's well-timed arrival, she would probably be dead. This event was to be the final nail in the Third Shinobi World War's coffin. Chapter 178, Support. After hearing her sister's story, she was trembling. She never expected that Pakura would be betrayed by her own village and fall victim to politics. She looked at her and said nothing, not knowing how to comfort her. Ryo also sighed, for Pakura was indeed a hero of the sand, having so many great achievements. The way that the fourth Hokage acted was chilling indeed. But in fact, Ryo felt that in all fairness, Raza did not make a mistake. He chose to sacrifice one person in exchange for the peace of the whole village. Raza chose the lesser of the two evils, but this didn't prevent Ryo from wanting to crush his head for his choices. Kushina on the other hand, didn't have any communication with Shie along the road. After all, Kushina was still very loyal to Konoha. But learning about Pakura's experience, Kushina's attitude towards the two sisters also changed, becoming very sympathetic with the Sans hero and, at the same time, worrying that one day the same thing could happen to her or to one of the people around her. Ryo, do you think Konoha would never? Kushina's voice was so faint, only half of what she said was heard. Ryo wasn't about to avoid her question. He went in straight forward saying, maybe. Sakumo-san also had a similar experience. Back in the day, he attempted suicide, which was caused by some high-level officials spreading news about his failure at a critical mission. His character couldn't take the judgment of the entire village, and he chose to commit suicide. Hearing Ryo, Kushina's face turned gloomy. This was the first time she ever heard about this matter. Minato's care for her well-being was extreme, he would never tell her this kind of news. But don't worry, Ne-san. I know that Minato Nii-san would never let anyone hurt you, and neither would I. I will make anyone who tries to hurt the people around me pay the heaviest price, even if they were the third himself. Ryo said with a smile. Most women are emotional, and Kushina was deeply touched by Ryo's words. Most of her fears were deluded. Of course, she would never admit this. Who did you say will protect me? I'm really strong already. Besides, I have Kurama, right, Kurama. Kushina was just reaching for random words to say, but she did not expect that the usually cold and mighty Kyubi would just say, yes. I will protect you. Her eyes turned red in an instant, and whatever was left of her worries disappeared. With so many people's support, what would have to worry about? On the other side, Pakura and she also cooled down a lot, and Pakura didn't seem as confused as she was back when Ryo met her. Pakura, what are you going to do next? Ryo asked. At first, she did not answer, and then she said very firmly, I want to go back to the Sand Village, I want to change it once and for all. To Ryo, Pakura's answer was a little unexpected. He remembered that after she was brought back through Edo Tensei by Kabuto, she hated the village and never seemed to think of anything besides revenge. However, now Pakura's attitude was rather different. She also did not expect such an answer. As she was about to say something to Pakura, the latter interrupted her, Sister, you don't have to worry. I know what I'm doing, believe me. Pakura's tone was very determined. She knew that she couldn't change her sister's decision. All she could do was to silently support her. Pakura, can you tell me why you made this choice? Don't you hold a grudge against the village now? Ryo asked with some curiosity. A grudge? Of course I'm holding a grudge, but it's against those on top of the village. I want to use my power to change the village, so that none of its ninjas would ever fall victim to politics again. Your return alive is defying the decision of the higher-ups in your village. Accepting you will be a thorn in the eye for their purposes. These people will want to get rid of you all the time to cover up their ugly true faces. Are you sure that you want to go back and play political games with such scum? Ryo said very seriously. Is that so? I did not think of such bad circumstances. You're more conscious than me, politically. Nevertheless, I have to return. Pakura's tone was still so firm. Ryo had no more objections, as her choice made him admire her to a great extent. Ryo knew that he would never make the same choice in the same situation. For him, the livelihood of those in the village was not worth such a risk, he would only risk his life for those who are important to him. But Pakura was choosing the hardest path, wanting to protect everyone. While Ryo wouldn't do such a thing, he certainly admired this kind of great people. Therefore, he decided to do something for Pakura. Since you are so determined, I won't say anything. But, I will not accept that you return on your own. If you die, then who would fulfill that promise you owe me? Now, I believe that Kushina-ne-san is very interested in going to the Sand Village. Ryo asked Kushina, who was by his side. The Sand Village? Yes, yes. Kushina's eyes lit up and she agreed immediately. You are Konoha ninjas, if you do this, Pakura was about to carry on, but Ryo didn't want to listen. Enough chit-chat. Pakura, you are my important nakama. Ryo quoted a captain he knew in his previous life. The effect of the captain's words was very obvious. Pakura's eyes became watery, showing everyone how moved she became. She did not understand why Ryo was willing to do so much for her sake, but she surely was on board of Ryo's pirate ship. In order to conceal her emotions, Pakura turned and walked straight in the direction of the Sand Village, followed by Ryo's group. The Sand Village was located in the center of the Wind Country's desert, and was surrounded by stone walls on all sides. The only entrance was a canyon between the stone walls. The Sand have heavy defensive troops in there, and also set up a variety of barriers. Without an insider to open those barriers, getting inside could prove to be very difficult. In the manga, Deidara managed to go into the village through the sky after bypassing gate security with the help of Sasori's sleeper agent Yura, taking out any guards watching the sky. After that, they managed to capture Gaara. Now, Ryo's group was also blocked by the boundaries. The sand ninjas responsible for guarding the borders initially lift the barriers, but then, the group happened to encounter an elder patrol ninja. He was shocked to see Pakura alive. After all, sacrificing her was their common decision. Now that she was alive, she was surely going to take revenge on them. You guys, Pakura had left the village just yesterday to perform a mission. This outsider is not Pakura. Don't be fooled. The elder patron ninja shouted at the guards. Pakura, the barriers were lifted, there's no time to waste time here. Ryo said to Pakura. We don't need to rush, I can prove my identity with my scorch release. With that old fellow over there, nothing can prove your identity. Ryo pointed at the elder inside and said. Pakura sighed, knowing that Ryo is right, and she did not hesitate. Ryo, please. She said. Ryo nodded, entering the ice lightning chakram mode. He threw in an ice scalpel, and then directly teleported to the elder. Before he had time to react, he was already under Ryo's genjutsu. When the guards saw the situation, they all wanted to attack Ryo. However, on the outside, Pakura quickly used her iconic scorch release, proving her identity. Chapter 179, Burn the Elders. Feeling the increasing temperature outside the canyon, the guards' movements stopped. This is scorch release, the one outside is definitely Pakura-sama. A sand ninja who had previously worked with Pakura said. But the elder just said. What's wrong? Could Pakura-sama's scorch release ever be faked? After the guards discussed it for a while, they finally decided to let Pakura in. Ryo picked up the elder in one hand and entered the village along with Pakura. Following her instructions, he and the others used the transformation jutsu to change their appearance to normal sand ninja. The architectural style of the village was mainly tower-shaped, to reduce the damage caused by the sand and wind. The roofs were hemispherical, having the function of water storage. Being the sand's hero, Pakura was instantly surrounded by enthusiastic villagers as soon as she returned. While on a mission, Pakura didn't show any impatience, greeting everyone with a smile. Ryo sighed, not liking such things. Kushina on the other hand was somewhat envious. She never experienced such a scene since she was a child. Sensei! Sensei! Outside the crowd, a brown-haired young girl that was 8 or 9 years old shouted at Pakura. Hearing her, Pakura showed a big smile, and waited for the girl who used a lot of effort to squeeze in through the crowd. Sensei! You are back! The girl took Pakura's hand and was very excited. I just left today, and here you are looking like you haven't seen me for a long time. Pakura patted on the Maki's head. It's been a very long day, said Maki. Pakura had always been very fond of this apprentice, never refusing any of her requests. This made Maki very dependent on Pakura. Well, your sensei had something to do, you should go ahead of me and start practicing. Pakura said a few words to Maki and signaled her to leave. While she was a little unhappy, Maki knew well that she shouldn't hinder her sensei's performance of any mission, so she could only reluctantly walk away. In the same polite manner, Pakura made the villagers spread out, and then led Ryo and the rest of the group and went to the Kazekich's building, where Raza and most of the village's elders were. Raza and the senior officials in the village obviously knew of Pakara's arrival. They were all surprised that she managed to return, and felt very uneasy about that. Raza, what are you going to do about this? Cho asked with some dissatisfaction. After the surrender of the village to Konoha, Cho and Ebizo abandoned their duties as consultants, living in seclusion in the sand village. However, a few days earlier, Raza sent people to summon them to his building. Facing the wrath of the mist, Raza and the Elders' Council made up their minds to hand over Pakara. However, Cho and Ebizo's opinion was well respected, so the village wanted their opinion. Raza informed the two of the Mist's request, to give Pakara's life in exchange for the Mist's peace. To Cho, the village could never abandon any one of its members. On the spot, she expressed her disapproval of the plan. Ebizo always agreed with Cho, and this time was no exception. After the two expressed their disapproval, they both returned to their place of seclusion. However, just after Cho and Ebizo returned, they learned from an elder that Raza still chose to hand Pakara over. Cho was very disappointed in Raza's behavior, and immediately returned to him with Ebizo, planning to scold him. But events did not wait for Cho to bring down her wrath on Raza, as news of Pakara's arrival reached the office before she did. What about this? Aren't ninjas expected to sacrifice their own lives for their village? Why would she have any complaint? Raza was about to answer, when a white-haired elder spoke. Do you agree with that, Raza? Cho ignored the elder and continued to ask Raza. Raza felt he did not take the wrong choice, and had the support of the elders, so he still insisted, saying, yes, I think so too. Hearing Raza's answer, Pakara couldn't help but sigh. Their way in life was far too different, and Cho and Ebizo couldn't stay in such a meeting any longer. Before leaving the place, Cho turned to the elders saying, Pakara is a good child. If I hear that anyone would still conspire on her, my puppets would not let them go. After saying that, Cho opened the door to leave, just to be met by Pakara's confused eyes. She and Ryo actually reached the door early. She just didn't know how to face the higher-ups of the village, and did not want to push the door right away. While being confused, she heard Cho's words inside. She did not expect that there were still elders in the village that supported her, but this made her heart more confused. The two faced each other, not saying a word for the longest time. Finally, Cho reached out, patting Pakara's shoulder and saying, whatever you want to do, do it. You are a good child, and I believe in you. After saying that, Cho and Ebizo left the conference room. The faces of everyone in the meeting room changed after hearing Cho. She had actually decided along with Ebizo to stand on Pakara's side. Pakara immediately turned to the leaving Cho, bowing her head and expressing her gratitude. After Cho left, she lifted her head and walked directly to Cho's empty seat. As she sat down, Ryo and the rest went with the flow, following her in. Gradually, the temperature in the room started to increase. Everyone remained quiet as they sat in their seats. The temperature of the room was rising more and more, and they were all constantly wiping the sweat off of their foreheads. Finally, the old man who spoke earlier couldn't help it anymore, slamming the table and standing up. Pakara, what on earth do you want to do? Dry us too. The elder did not finish his words when Ryo lightning chakram mode flickered behind him, with his ice scalpel slitting his throat immediately. Pakara. Another elder also stood up protesting, and a flaming orb greeted him, scorching his body dry. Silence dominated the room again, and no one else dared to stand up and say anything. Every elder in the room realized that Pakara before them was not pig ready to be slaughtered as they previously imagined, but a tiger that could take their lives at any time. Pakara, this is enough. The silent Raza finally spoke. With Pakara getting the support Cho and Ebizo, he knew well that today's meeting room was going to see blood. What caught him off guard, however, was the fact that Pakara was so decisive. She got 2 elders killed mercilessly. Counting the one they brought in through the door, that makes 3 elders. These elders were no ordinary people in the village, they represented the village's various clans. Raza felt he could still settle the matter with 3 clans. But if he did not stop Pakara now, she might end up annihilating every elder in the room, and then half of the sand village would end up rioting. Pakara, I know you're angry and full of hatred, but it was done for the sake of the village. You know the state we're in now. We can only negotiate with the hidden mist. Raza explained. Pakara didn't pay attention to Raza, but stood up and walked over to the next elder. Don't kill me. Pakara, if you kill me, my people won't, the elder was burned to ashes before finishing his words. Pakara. Raza was very angry. He controlled some golden sand around him and made it go straight towards Pakara. She didn't pay attention to his attack, and continued walking to the next elder. Ryo shook his head and teleported to Pakara's side, gathering an ice shield to block Raza's gold sand. Why is the Hokage-sama so angry? Is there something wrong with Pakara's behavior with these elders? Ryo said with a smile. Ice. You are a Yuki. You're from the mist? Pakara, you've actually took the mist's side. Raza saw the ice and couldn't help but think that Pakara's survival was the result of a deal she made with the mist. Ryo did not explain, and Pakara did not pay attention to Raza, continuing to burn the next elder. Chapter 180, The Kyuubi returns. After killing the elders one by one, Pakara turned her eyes to Raza. So, the traitor still wants to kill me. Raza's expression showed more and more of his rage. Pakara looked at Ryo, and he understood, leaving her side. Judging from what he had already seen, it seemed like Pakara's control over her scorch release had reached perfection. Before, Pakara also said that she had become cage tier, so Ryo decided to let her had deal with Raza on her own. Without Ryo's ice in his way, Raza controlled his sand towards Pakara. However, she did not dodge, letting the golden sand wrap around her from all sides. Die you traitor! Sand waterfall funeral. Raza packed the gold sand with chakra, and controlled it to squish Pakara inside it. However, he soon found out that no matter how much chakra he injected into the sand, its shape wasn't changing. Realizing that something was wrong, he immediately pulled back his sand, just to discover that a lot less of it was gold. Haha, what a messy method! While Raza wasn't getting what's going on, Ryo activated his Mangekyo, observing the sand. Of course, no one could see his eyes as he brought Fugaku's contact lenses. Ryo, what method did Pakara use? Asked Kushina curiously. She actually formed a protective scorch layer around her body. It's a small area around her that's so hot, it melts the gold within the sand as soon as it comes into contact with it. Gold melts at 1064 degrees, 1948 degrees Fahrenheit, and she could actually melt it. Ryo explained Pakara's method to Kushina while being still surprised by the terrible temperature of her attacks. Raza saw a small hole in the floor around Pakara, and also understood that he melted the gold in his sand. His face became gloomy, he didn't expect that her control over her Kekii Genkai would reach such a level. However, he wasn't about to let go of her. His gold sand surged ready to continue its onslaught. At this moment, everyone inside heard a rapid footstep outside the door. A ninja rushed into the conference room in panic screaming, "Kazekage-sama! Things are bad! What is it? What happened?" Raza asked. There were news spreading that the elders are being held up in the conference room, and now. The elders? How come there are only two, on the ground? The messenger's voice was fainting and sweat was pouring from his forehead. As you can see, they are all dead, said Pakara faintly. Pakara-sama, this is, you doing? Yes. Pakara did not try to hide her deeds, and admitted them without hesitation. Hearing that answer, the messenger immediately ran out. Raza wanted to stop him, but he also understood that the fire that was ignited by Pakara could not be tamed. He sighed, letting him run away. Pakara, I am sorry for you, but the rest of the sand village is innocent. If you still have any attachment to it, take these few mist ninjas and leave, don't destroy the village. Raza said with some decadence. I don't know Kazekage-sama how you decided that I must have betrayed the village. Not only mist ninjas could use ice, you know. Is it? Raza was stunned, and then turned around looking at Ryo. The latter smiled and then undid the transformation, saying hello to Raza, Kazekage-sama, long time no see. Ryo Yamanaka. What are you? I'm here because I saved Pakara. We have been assigned to investigate and locate the Rokubai Jinchuriki, and we managed to find him. However, we also found a few other mist ninjas alongside him, and all of them were besieging Pakara. Being ninjas of Konoha, the Sand's allies, we obviously weren't going to let her die. I intervened, slaughtered the Rokubai and saving Pakara. Slaughtered the Rokubai, Ryo said those words so lightly, and they fell into Raza's ears like thunderbolts. He slaughtered the Rokubai? How terrible! It's been only a few months since Raza saw Ryo, and he's already this strong? Raza already knew that the mist dispatched the Rokubai Jinchuriki to ensure Pakura's death. If Ryo had really slaughtered him, the Sand Village could not afford to offend him, and face such a great force. Thinking about this, Raza's behavior made a 180-degree turn, immediately revealing a bright smile. Thank you so much Konoha for your great help. Thanks to you, our hero could survive and make it home safely. Ryo despised Raza's face. But in order to make things easier for Pakura, he had to bear with him. Pakura was actually relieved to see Raza's attitude change. Before entering the village, she told Ryo that she didn't want to become Kage, and that her goal this time was just the Sans elders. Ryo also had no interest in who should be the Kaze Kage at all. Since Pakura wasn't going for it, he wasn't going to push her in that direction. Moreover, as far as Raza is concerned, even though Ryo that he was undoubtedly a scumbag, he was still a very competent Kaze Kage. Giving Pakura away for the sake of peace with the mist, sacrificing Gaara's happiness in the manga to make him into a perfect Jinchuriki, to his last breath, he relentlessly tried to get the village stronger. Even as he was being sealed after being reincarnated by Kabuto, his last words were I entrust the village to you now. Gaara. Ryo and Raza had a talk in the conference room, while the outside of the office was being surrounded by the elders' clans. Ryo had long felt the change in numbers of sand ninjas, but was not worried at all. He calmly said to Raza, you might have some trouble, Kaze Kage-sama. Raza immediately used Eye of Sand to see the outside. Seeing the building surrounded by thousands of ninjas, his face became really heavy. You've been far too impulsive, Pakura. Now what? How could this be solved? Raza complained. You don't have to worry, Kaze Kage-sama, we will handle it. Kushina ne-san, I leave this to you. Said Ryo. Ryo, Kushina-san, please show mercy. Pakura said with concern. Haha, rest assured. I'm the best at scaring people. Kushina went out with a smile nodding to Ryo, who followed her closely. Kurama, I have promised Pakura. You cannot have too much fun. Kushina, while looking extremely loose, was actually a little worried herself. Okay, I know. Kurama said rather impatiently. As soon as Ryo and Kushina left the office, all the sand ninjas came at him. Kusina smiled, and the Kyuubi's chakra wrapped her body in an instant. Not long after a golden Kyuubi appeared before everyone on the Sans camp. Kushina's control over her Biju was still not perfect, so she simply gave him control instead. As soon as he took control, Kurama screamed, and his horrible chakra flowed out like a tsunami. Chapter 181, The End of the War. 70 to 80% of the sand ninjas surrounding the building were Chunin and Genins. They were all overwhelmed by the Kyuubi's chakra, with most of them being frightened and pale. In fact, it wasn't just the lower-ranked ninjas, everyone among the troops surrounding the building, including the ones in the lead, were really scared. Kurama started condensing a Biju Dama, then launched towards the desert quite far away from the village. Boom! The Biju Dama exploded, leaving behind a mushroom cloud. A blast of wind and sand spread out of it in all directions, reaching the sand ninjas, breaking their spirits, and getting the weakest among them to flee. Revenge for their elders? Defending their clan's glory? Vain words. All of that was insignificant compared to their own lives. One of them took the lead, and naturally others followed. In a few minutes, what used to be a crowd of thousands of ninjas became a lot of 8 people, one being Quasi Kage, and the others being Jonins. This is boring. Kurama glanced at the remaining people and lost all interest in a fight. Facing the Kyuubi, a Jonin was equal to a Chunin or Genin, and a Quasi Kage was nothing but a stronger ant. Kushina, I'll leave this to you. After saying that, Kurama returned Kushina's body under her control. Just like Kurama, Kushina had no interest in fighting the remaining 8. She simply left the tailed coat mode, returning all of Kurama's chakra to her body. Seeing the disappearance of the Kyuubi, the 8 looked at each other and then rushed towards the Kazekage's office. After remaining on the sidelines for so long, Ryo realized that it was time for him to intervene. After he entered the Ice Lightning Chakra mode, he flickered in, blocking their way. You are Ryo Yamanaka. Hugo, who was among the 8, recognized Ryo. Looking at him, Ryo also remembered who he was. It was the Jonin from his first battles against the Sand. Since this was an old acquaintance, Ryo decided on giving him special treatment. He opened his Mangekyo, using it to put Hugo under Genjutsu. At first, Hugo could only sense darkness before him, and then he lost control over his body, walking step by step towards Ryo. The other 7 wanted to pull him back, but they were all pushed away by him. He watched himself get closer and closer, and was extremely afraid as was able to see Ryo's crystal clear ice scalpel. Hugo was finally stopped by Ryo. He found his enemy right before his body, with his scalpel against his throat. If he wanted, Ryo was only a motion away from slitting it. Snapping his fingers, Ryo returned to Hugo all control over his body. Therefore, the Jonin could only watch Ryo's smile and tremble. Not being stopped, he quietly rejoined the other 7. Raza was watching everything that just happened. He finally understood how Pakura was able to get back so confidently to kill all those elders. She has such great support. The regular ninjas had suffered great losses in the war, and still had the rock to face. Ryo and Kusina alone were enough to devastate the village. Raza took a deep breath. They asked, Pakura, what's your main motive? Do you want to be the Hokage? Pakura shook her head, saying very seriously, Hokage-sama, I want to change the village, but I never thought of becoming Kage. What I've done was taking down all the elders, to become the San's new and only elder. Would you help me settle things down with these clans? Yes. Raza was quite surprised. He didn't expect that Pakura would be so committed to even give more for the village. He remained silent, considering whether this would be good or bad for the Sand. On the other side of the Sand village, Cho and Ibizo were sitting down facing each other, drinking tea, while watching the entire situation. Sister, you really don't want to stop this? Ibizo said with concern. I just said, Pakura is a good child. I believe in her. Moreover, this village could indeed make use of some change. Cho was very dissatisfied with Raza's actions when gave Pakura to the mist. After all, Pakura was a sand ninja, a sand hero. Cho could not accept the fact that her life was exchanged for peace. Therefore, to Cho, this village that could not protect its own men had already decayed, and was due for great changes. She was supporting Pakura's action completely. Ibizo didn't question her back, her opinion was clear. However, I didn't expect that brat to become so strong in so little time. It seems that we've really become too old. Cho said, looking at Ryo and sighing. Oh indeed, we're so old. Our retirement was definitely the right choice. Ibizo echoed his sister's thoughts. In the Kazakich's building, after taking so much time thinking, Raza finally chose to make a compromise. Raza knew all too well that Pakura, with Ryo and Kushina's help, and her own great power, could take down all the clans that would oppose her. The fact that she would actually agree to settle things down with the morning clans along with him led him to make his choice. Pakura, from this day on, you shall be the San's only elder consultant. I hope that together, we may lead the village to be stronger. After finishing his words, Raza walked outside. He first expressed his gratitude to Kushina, and then took the 8 remaining ninjas far away, while being doubtful of what he should be saying to them. The next day, Raza announced that the village had abolished its elder council system, and that Pakura had become the village's sole consultant. Ryo and the others also bid farewell to Pakura and left the village in the afternoon of that day. It was year 47 since the inception of Konoha, and the Third World War had been going on for nearly 8 years. Just like every time, Konoha emerged from the war as the sole victor. The village actually withdrew from the war early, enjoying peace, while the other villages were not so lucky. The Sand and the Rock were still fighting, and some friction still existed between the Rock and the Cloud. The Sand were actually in a very unfavorable position. Fortunately, after the great change in the village's top, the Sand's front became more united, and the new blood in the leadership led to much more successful battles. The Rock couldn't take them down in a short time as they envisioned. Therefore, they just gave up on continuing the fight and signed a peace treaty with them. With that, fights stopped among all 5 major countries. The battles between smaller nations have also gradually subsided. In this way, the Third Shinobi World War finally came to an end, ushering a new chapter in history. Chapter 182, Ryo's Dream. See, almost a week passed since Ryo's group returned to Konoha from the Sand Village. 3 days after their return, news of the big mess that Ryo and Kushina made in the Sand Village were placed on the 3RD's desk, and the same information was also delivered to Danzo by route at almost the same time. The news caused the Third a headache. Now, he started regretting sending Ryo and Kushina to investigate the Rokubai's appearance. Yes, the hidden risk of the Rokubai Jinchuriki was dealt with, but the Kyuubi's full appearance in the Sand Village was definitely going to have a great impact. At the same time, after discovering about the incident, Danzo began to secretly gather support from the various clans in Konoha to exert pressure on the third. Eventually, at a high-level meeting, the third publicly announced that he was to step down from his position, and at the same time carry elections to determine the fourth Hokage. Kushina felt great guilt hearing this. She hated the fact that the third had to resign because of her deeds. Ryo, however, was surprised by how things went so similarly to the original timeline. In the anime, the third was also shown to retire at about the same time, but for different reasons. It was related to the great losses the village had to endure during the Third World War. Now, it seemed to Ryo that the third just used Danzo's faction's pressure as pretext to step down from his position. That was indeed the case. After being Hokage for so many years, the third eventually became tired. Konoha had great younger talents, many of them fitting to be the village's Kage. He felt at ease passing down the torch to any of them. As soon as the news spread out, the entirety of Konoha was boiling. The third had been in power for many long years, and most of the ninjas in the village still regarded him highly and respected him greatly. With him announcing his resignation, the villagers in Konoha felt surprised and quite reluctant. However, none of them had any intention to influence his decision. The next day, the third announced the list of candidates for the position of Hokage. He actually announced a total of 5 candidates. The first was the Sunin, Orochimaru. The second was yet another Sunin, Jiraiya. The third was Konoha's Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze. The fourth was Konoha's White Fang, Sakumo Hatake. And the final one was actually our protagonist, Ryo Yamanaka. Ryo was shocked when finding out that he was proposed as candidate by the third. He felt that his qualifications, prestige, and age were not fitting to such a position in any way. The biggest hero emerging the Third Shinobi World War was Minato. The one who had most prestige in the village was Orochimaru. How would someone like Ryo even compete against such people? He's probably just filling the list. In the end, Ryo came to this conclusion. On the first day of the elections, Ryo went to the third training ground just as he did every day. However, the ever-punctual Shisui was actually late. Ryo waited for 10 minutes before actually beginning to worry about his apprentice. Just as he was about to enter Sage Mode in order to locate him, he saw him running towards him in excitement. "Sensei, Sensei! Look at this!" Shisui quickly gave a leaflet to Ryo, who picked it up just to be shocked by what was upon it. On this leaflet were the statistics of the votes for the 5 candidates. Seeing the top 3 was what frightened Ryo. The first was Minato, the second was Orochimaru, the third was actually Ryo, the fourth was Sakumo and the fifth was Jiraiya. Moreover, the top 3 were only separated by only a few hundred votes. Ryo could not understand this. How would so many people support him? Could there be someone manipulating the results in the shadows? But that truth was that many people did have complete support for Ryo. While Minato was indeed Konoha's biggest hero in this war, the one involved with the most battles was actually Ryo. Ryo had appeared in almost every battlefield. His strength left a deep impact on his fellow ninjas. Not only that, Ryo wasn't just a fighter on those battlefield, he was head of the medical team. Ryo had saved the lives of countless ninjas in the Third War. Most of those ninjas actually chose to support him with their votes. Ryo was not interested in the position of Hokage. His dream had always been standing at the top of the world of shinobi, and that hadn't changed. He felt that by becoming a Hokage, his utmost responsibility would become protecting the village at all times. All his future plans would have to be centered on the village's interests, which was too much responsibility for him. How troublesome! "Sensei, you don't seem to be very happy. You're getting great support already on this first day. It is very likely that you will be the next Hokage. That's the troublesome part. Shisui, today, train on your own. Your sensei has something to do, I have to go at once." Finishing his words, Ryo disappeared immediately. In the Yamanaka district, Inoichi Yamanaka, Shikaku Nara, and Choza Akimichi were sitting down together, discussing the matter of the elections. "I've expected the current situation. My only miscalculation was Ryo's support rate. That kid has managed to get so many supports," Shikaku said with a smile. "Well, that's true. It seems that this time, it's very likely for him to actually become the next Hokage." Inoichi nodded in agreement. Choza said nothing. This whole brainstorming thing was never his jam. Just as the two were in mid-discussion, Ryo entered. He wanted to meet Shikaku as soon as possible after leaving the third training ground. Hearing the conversion between the two, Ryo, who was outside the door, directly pushed his way in, saying, "I don't want to be the Hokage." His words made the two stop talking for a while. Even Choza dropped the fruit from his hand and glanced at Ryo in shock. "Ryo, you don't want to be the Hokage? Why?" After a few minutes, Inoichi broke the silence. "Because being a Hokage was never my dream." "Your dream? What's that? Can you tell us?" Shikaku was intrigued by Ryo's answer. "My dream is to stand at the top of this world as the strongest shinobi there is." Ryo's voice was not loud, but it was very firm. The room became silent again. After quite some time, Shikaku asked again, "The strongest in the world, like the first Hokage?" "No. Beyond that, even beyond the Rikudo Sennin." "Beyond the Rikudo Sennin, that sounds good." Choza's first words in the meeting were his expression of his support of Ryo's idea. The other two looked at each other for quite some time, and then also agreed with Ryo. After reaching a consensus, the atmosphere in Inoichi's house was much easier. Shikaku felt a little bad about Ryo giving up on such an opportunity, but Inoichi and Choza did not care. "So, what do you plan on doing next? Should the clan directly announce your withdrawal from the elections?" asked Inoichi. "Well, yes, but not just yet. I've got a feeling that some people are even more eager to my withdrawal," Ryo said with a smile. Chapter 183, The Fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. The Hokage elections, which were scheduled to last a week, had been going for 3 days. During those days, the votes count between the top 3 was very close. On the second day, both Ryo and Orochimaru actually surpassed Minato, taking first place, but later things went back to how they used to be. In the meeting room of the Yamanaka clan, the heads of the Inoshika-cho alliance were paying close attention to the ongoing elections. These 3 days, all the smaller clans went to vote. "Starting tomorrow, I believe the major clans will start putting their weight, won't they?" Inoichi looked at Shikaku asking him. "Well, that's how things should go," Shikaku answered. For a while, his face was quite heavy. Choza felt it was strange and asked Inoichi, "What's wrong with Shikaku?" "Nothing, I'm just wondering why that person hadn't taken action yet." "Well, indeed. If he doesn't come today, tomorrow we could only..." Inoichi did not finish his words, and a Yamanaka rushed in. "Inoichi Dono, Shikaku Dono, Choza Dono, Danzo came he wanting to see you." Hearing that, the trio's eyes lit up. After waiting for 2 days, Danzo finally couldn't stand how things were going anymore. In the front hall of Inoichi's place, the 3 clan heads appeared at the same time. Since they were at his place, Inoichi was very enthusiastic and cheerfully greeted Danzo. "Danzo-san, long time no see." "You 3, it's been a long time indeed." Danzo faintly responded. After the 4 took a seat, Danzo went straight to the point, saying, "What do you want to Ryo to withdraw from the elections?" He came in knowing he had to pay a price, and facing the most intelligent man in Konoha, he had no reason to beat around the bush. "Danzo-san, thank you for being so frank and for not talking nonsense. Our tribes want to have control over the entirety of Konoha's medical system." Shikaku felt that Danzo was coming on the first day. Therefore, he gathered the other heads of the Inoshika-cho to discuss how to deal with him. Putting everything into consideration, Shikaku speculated that the possibility of Ryo beating Minato and becoming the Hokage was about 50%. However, he never thought that Ryo wasn't willing to become the Hokage, which disrupted his long-term plans. In the manga, Orochimaru and Danzo were cooperative. Danzo wanted to become Hokage, in order to mobilize more resources for his research, while Danzo was trying to manipulate him to help him control the village. This time, on the second day of the elections, Danzo also went to Orochimaru to proposing cooperation. This Orochimaru, however, was different, and what Ryo provided him with was enough for his research. Therefore, he had no interest in becoming Hokage, as it should only waste his precious research time. However, Ryo actually especially came to find him in advance, asking him to put down the experiments he has in hand, and actually cooperate with Danzo. Orochimaru was somewhat unwilling at first. His research on Hashirama's cells was very critical and he didn't want to waste time. Ryo obviously guessed that he would refuse, and therefore brought a scroll with him, one in which he hid the corpses of Azetsu. Orochimaru looked at the corpse and his eyes lit up. Its special body was too attractive for him, and he decided to go along with Ryo's plan. This way, Danzo was able to make a deal with Orochimaru. On that basis, and in order to support Orochimaru, Danzo first went to Inoichi, to get Ryo off the way, and reduce the competition to Orochimaru. The whole medical system of Konoha, this request is too much. Danzo shook his head and refused directly. After that, the two negotiated, with Inoichi and the drowsy Choza listening silently. Finally, after what seemed like decades, Danzo and Shikaku reached a consensus. Danzo was to ensure the Ino-Shikacho alliance's control over Konoha's hospital, and Ryo was to withdraw from the elections, and the clans could not show support of Minato in the elections. On the fourth day, on behalf of the Yamanaka CLA, Inoichi announced publicly that Ryo had withdrawn from the elections as he was too young and not competent enough for the position. This reason sounded perfect. After all, Ryo was still only 14 years old, but that seemed to be ignored by everyone. After he withdrew, only Orochimaru and Danzo were left. Ryo's withdrawal actually made it impossible for the big clans to make a move on the fourth day, and the number of votes cast did not increase by much. On the fifth day, the voting took a tremendous change. Using his methods, he got most of the smaller and medium clans to vote for Orochimaru, getting him far ahead of Minato. Minato and I-san, why would you worry? In the third training ground, Ryo said to Minato. Ryo, don't say nonsense. Minato has to remain calm, don't irritate him. Kushina said to Ryo. Ne-san, you misunderstood. I just wanted to say that he has nothing to worry about. Ryo said. Nothing to worry about? The current situation is very bad for Minato. Kushina said. It's very simple. Ne-san is a ninja from a civilian family. In Konoha, we've only had people from renowned ninja clans be on top of the village. Ninjas from civilian families are very difficult to come by actually. Now, they finally get their genius, they won't leave him without support. By the time all of this would end, Ne-san will be the one winning. What Ryo explained was a major hidden reason behind Minato's popularity, and was enough indeed to get him to win. But Minato's vote count is still too much behind, I can't help but be worried. Kushina said in a sullen tone. Actually, Orochimaru-san doesn't want to be Hokage at all. Don't worry Ne-san. Ryo didn't want to see Kushina sad, and actually told her of the truth. Hearing that, the previously irresponsive Minato frowned as said, Ryo, did you just say that Orochimaru-san doesn't want to be Hokage? How? Literally, he has other things to do. Being Hokage would only waste his time. You don't want to be Hokage, Jiraiya-sensei doesn't want to be Hokage, Sakumo-san doesn't want to be Hokage, and now you tell me that even Orochimaru-san doesn't want to be Hokage. Does this mean I've been worried about nothing this whole time? Kushina was in great disbelief. Yeah, that's it. From the beginning, only Minato and Ne-san wanted to be Hokage. However, even if we were to try and go against him, we wouldn't stand much of a chance anyway. As Ryo said, on the sixth day, civilians and non-clan belonging ninjas poured into the vote center, and Minato's support rates continued to rise until he surpassed Orochimaru again. On the seventh day as well, the two largest clans in the village, the Uchiha and the Hyuga, decided to also support Minato. Seeing them do so, Ryo understood how Minato was always so calm, he had already gained their support secretly. This way, the one to become Konoha's fourth Hokage was chosen. Just like in the manga, the fourth Hokage was still Minato Namikaze. Chapter 184, Start of the Bloody Mist. The next day after the elections, Minato invited Ryo and the others to the barbecue restaurant for celebration. While Ryo's refusal of becoming the Hokage disappointed Shikaku for a while, the Ino-Shikacho getting Konoha's hospital was enough to make up for it. Actually, the only one really disappointed after the elections was Danzo, who sat gloomily in Root's headquarters after Orochimaru lost the elections. He had dedicated a lot of resources to support Orochimaru, and even gave the Ino-Shikacho control over the hospital, only to eventually fail. The Uchiha, the Hyuga, I shall definitely make you pay the price. Minato's victory made Danzo hold a great grudge against the Hyuga and the Uchiha. A few days later, the third Hokage publicly announced that Minato shall be his successor as Konoha's fourth Raikage, and that the succession ceremony would take place within 2 months. From that moment, Minato was supposed to stick by the 3RDS side to learn about running the village. After the Inoshikacho took over Konoha's hospital, Ryo naturally became its new manager. The first thing he did was removing Danzo's men hidden within the hospital's leadership and promote the medical ninjas he had trained during the war. At the same time, he required all medical ninjas in the hospital who did not learn modern medicine to participate in special training sessions. At first, these medical ninjas were initially dissatisfied, but their dissatisfaction faded away as they learned about modern medicine and started to see its magic. Konoha had just elected its fourth Hokage, and the Hidden Mist, far in the water country, had also undergone tremendous changes. On one night, the village had all of the country's ports closed and prohibited anyone from entering or leaving the village. At the same time, inside the village, a massacre was starting to take place, one against of the Kekii Genkai-wielding clans. The reason was that 4 days prior to that, while the Mizukage was giving a speech, both the elders of the Kagaya and Yuki clans tried to assassinate him, and then disappeared. This happened before everyone's eyes, and the two clans could not defend themselves. Pakura at times summoned the Sanbai, slaughtering everyone present from the two clans. Learning of the news, the elders of the Yuki clan immediately went to Yagura to discuss the matter, but things did not go well. As soon as the elders entered, Yagura attacked them on the spot. Eventually, he emerged victorious, killing them, and surviving while seriously injured. The rest of the two clans' people weren't about to sit still, they joined forces together and tried to escape the village. In the end, the two major clans ended up being slaughtered, with other smaller clans also being ravaged. Just like that, all of the village's Kekii Genkai-wielding clans were destroyed. This opened the gates to the darkest era, the era of the Bloody Mist. At this time, the Bloody Mist's initiator, Yagura, was sitting on his chair with his eyes dull. Before him, were a peculiar man, the hotel owner, Yamada Nagakyu. Yamada's eyes shined crimson, and he started directly at Yagura. Soon after that, the special patterns his eyes disappeared, and Yagura fell into sleep on his desk. In the pit thousands of miles away, Uchiha Madara had his eyes closed, and he was looking even older than before. Beside him was a white Zetsu, holding a pair of 3 Tomo Sharinans in closed glassware. A few minutes later, Madara's eyes blew out blood and tears, and the Zetsu quickly opened the glassware and took out the eyes, handing them to Madara. The latter took out his eyes, and placed the new Sharinans in his eye sockets. At the same time, great vitality was injected within his body from the Gadumazo. With this vitality, the new eye immediately merged with Madara. "White, how many Sharinans do we have left?" Madara asked. "Madara-sama, we did not collect many Sharinans in the second and third wars. Recently, you have used several pairs, and now we only have 2 pairs left," Zetsu answered. "Ordinary Sharinans cannot take that dojutsu power. Every pair allows me to control Yagura once, before being destroyed." Madara touched his eyes, feeling slightly helpless, and then said, "How's Obito?" "Rest assured, Madara-sama, his body has made a great recovery, and it has basically adapted to Hashirama's cells." Madara nodded and felt more at ease, as his future representative should not have any problems. During this time, Madara was deepening his control over Yagura. In fact, maintaining control over the young Kage was no easy task for the current Murata. He was close to 90 years old, and physically weaker than he had ever been. Even his own eyes were transplanted in Nagato. In order to be able to keep his control over Yagura, Madara was summoning the residual power of his Rinnegan, using it through substitute Sharinans. Unfortunately, the Rinnegan's residual power was too much for the Sharinans he used to handle. Every time he used Genjutsu on the Kage, he had to get his eyes replaced. Just a little more. When Obito completely adapts to Hashirama's cells, the next part of the plan shall begin. But Madara-sama, the girl that Obito cares about, had not yet left Konoha. We did not get any chances to capture her at all. No hurry. It should take around a month to get Obito to adapt with his new body. During this time, you will send more Zetsu clones to observe the village. There will be an opportunity. Finishing his words, Madara closed his eyes. White Zetsu sank into the ground, and the whole restored its silence. In Konoha, Minato and Kushina summoned everyone to the third training ground. On the previous days, Minato had been following the third to learn more on running the village. Therefore, when Minato summoned them, everyone was surprised and felt that the matter should not be trivial. "Minato, I have things to do, you know, I'm busy gathering material for my books." Jiraiya hadn't been in Konoha for the few days following the election. He had been wandering around the country between hot springs and bathhouses. "Yeah, why are we here, Ni-san?" Ryo urged Minato, and he was too busy running the hospital he had just taken over. Minato looked at Kushina, and she became immediately shy and her face turned red. He smiled and said, "Kushina and I have decided to get married." "Well, congratulations. Then I'll be leaving to gather more mat." With his focus on his material, it took Jiraiya a while before he actually realized how big the news was. So sudden. Really? As the matter was not trivial, Ryo showed surprise. "I have promised Kushina, during the war on the battlefield of the Lightning Country, that I will marry her as soon as the war ends." At this time, no one could sit still. The news was so big and everyone gathered around the newly engaged couple showering them with questions. Even the usually serious Sakumo couldn't help but smile. Facing this rain of questions, Minato answered them one by one, and the usually feisty Kushina was blushing all the way through, not saying a word. Chapter 185, The Red Hot Habanero and the Yellow Flash. In the noise made by everyone, Kushina looked at Minato's smile, and could only feel disbelief. She sorted out her red hair that was floating with the winds, recalling her past with Minato, and smiling discreetly. When Kushina first came to Konoha, she was attracted by the massive figures on the Hokage rock, and that ignited her dream of becoming Hokage. The first time she caught Minato's eye was at the academy. In class, her self-introduction got her ridiculed by all students, not only because of her distinct fashion of speaking, but also because of her distant dreams. Minato was the only one in class to recognize her dream. Therefore, she had a good impression on the boy with the golden hair and big smile. Children are always curious and aggressive towards anything different. The children never saw anything like Kushina's bright hair. Therefore, they started to tease her about her looks, calling her a tomato, and some of them even reached for her hair. Being an Uzumaki, from an early age, Kushina had amazing amounts of chakra. Her peers were no opponents of her. After getting beat, the kids did not give up, and kept mocking her hair color and teasing her again and again, enjoying angering her. With them teasing her again and again, Kushina hated her red hair more and more. Whenever someone laughed at her because of it, she made them pay with her fists. Minato was watching all of this, but never helped her. This changed her impression little by little. For over a year, Kushina quarreled with her teammates. In the end, one of them couldn't just stand being beat by her again and again, and ended up bringing his brother, a genin who had just graduated, to beat her up. Despite this, Kushina still managed to emerge victorious. This gave the Red Hot Habanero a reputation that made everyone afraid to bully her. A few years later, she and Minato graduated. Minato joined Team Jiraiya, while Kushina was focused more on practicing the Uzumaki's Fuinjutsu. What she did know was that after graduation, Minato kept an eye on her secretly. One day, as she was returning home, she found a cloud ninja ambush. She was taken away by the ninjas who took her by surprise, but she secretly tore off her hair little by little, leaving a red hair trail behind her without them noticing. However, no one noticed her absence until they reached the borders of the Fire Country. As she gradually fell in despair, a figure emerged from the darkness under the dark clouds blocking the moonlight, killing the cloud ninjas. "Are you hurt? I came to rescue you." Seeing Minato, Kushina's tense nerves finally were loose, and she collapsed to the ground. He immediately rushed over to her, picking her up from the ground. In the moonlight, Kushina saw her red hair in Minato's hands. "Such beautiful hair," I immediately noticed. It was at that moment that Minato took over her heart, not leaving place for anyone else. "Ni-san, are you okay? Your face is so red." Ryo interrupted Kushina's thoughts. "I'm fine. I just remembered some things." Kushina quickly shook her head. Since the succession ceremony was about 1.5 months away, Minoru asked everyone to help him pick a day for the wedding ceremony. Jiraiya had been Minato's sensei since his graduations. Moreover, both Minato and Kushina were orphans, and such responsibilities that usually went to the parents fell to him. Although usually carefree, he was serious and discussed the matter with everyone as this was his apprentice's once-in-a-lifetime big night. Eventually, September 16th was picked to be the wedding day. Being that the choice was made on August 26, 20 days remained for preparations. T/N, actually 21. But whatever XD. Far from his usual habits, Jiraiya also took responsibility for the wedding preparations. Minato went to the 3RDS office informing him that he was going to get married, and proposed that the Hokage himself should take some time off for preparations. The third very happily agreed. Since ninjas usually went in and out of the 3RDS office regularly, when Minato and the third were talking, several people heard of the news. The third did not make the matter confidential, since it was a happy event, and it didn't bother if it would be spread out. Even in the Naruto verse, people love talking about celebrities, and the biggest one in Konoha was certainly the upcoming Hokage, Minato. Hey, did you hear that Minato is about to get married soon? What? Are you sure this is not fake news? Of course it is true, my neighbor was at the Hokage's office. He heard it. The news was spread through the village, and in just a few minutes, everyone in Konoha's streets knew of the news that Minato was about to get married. The villagers of Konoha sent their blessings to their upcoming Hokage, and everyone was immersed in happiness. After the news reached the Hatake clan, Kakashi left his place. He was going to the memorial stone, wanting to tell Obito the news. Obito, did you hear? Sensei is going to marry Kushina Ne-san. I want to give them a special gift. Kakashi had just reached the stone when he heard Rin's voice. He did not show his face, but instead stood on the side and listened quietly. All right, Obito. I am leaving. I'll see next time when I finish preparing the gift. After finishing her words, Rin left. Kakashi approached the stone, and stood quietly. What he wanted to tell Obito was already conveyed by Rin. The next day, after picking up a C-rank mission related to the Wave Country, Rin left Konoha alone. Her plan was to make a polished shell necklace to Kushina. Since the wedding was approaching, she decided to go to a nearby beach to collect seashells. As soon as she left the village, the Zetsu watching the gate started tracing her. He quietly approached her, and then used the wind to get his spores upon her body. After the spores were attached to her, White disappeared into the ground and returned to the pit reporting to Madara. Madara-sama, Madara-sama. The young girl that Obito likes has left Konoha, and she's now going towards the Wave Country. Zetsu emerged from the ground yelling to Madara. Wave Country? Well fitting. Zetsu, guide the mist ninjas to capture her. My plan should start. Yes. Madara-sama. Chapter 186, Rin's Crisis. Unlike Ryo, Rin did not have the Ice Lightning Chakra mode flicker or ice teleportation, so her movement speed wasn't that high. Her trip from Konoha to the Wave Country was going to take a while. During this time, Zetsu was tailing her. Following Madara's instructions, he transformed his shape into a mist umbu, delivering orders from the Mizukage to the mist ninjas in the Wave Country, which stated that Rin should be captured. After receiving the order, the mist ninjas immediately set up an ambush at the entrance of the Wave Country, and lurked there waiting for Rin's arrival. Rin was oblivious to all of this. She just made a simple camouflage and went directly into the country. On the mist ninjas' side, it took them a while, but they were able to confirm her identity. Rin's combat capabilities were those of a Chunin at best. To ensure that they would have no trouble, the mist ninjas sent to Takubitsu Jonins to capture her. On top of that, the two approached her when it was dark. Rin didn't even notice they were then until it was too late. They managed to capture her with no problems. After catching Rin, the mist ninjas knocked her down unconscious following the Umbu's instructions. They opened her bag, and threw away Ryo's ice scalpel and destroyed his teleportation barrier mark, throwing them on the ground. Later, they sealed her chakra, and sent her to the water country overnight. In Konoha, Ryo was in Orochimaru's lab. Before the elections, he had given the Sunin a corpse of a white Zetsu. Orochimaru found interesting things after nearly a month of conducting research on the corpse, and couldn't wait to call Ryo. Orochi-san, what did you find out? Ryo hadn't been in the lab for a long time, but Orochimaru remained silent for a good while after he entered, making him lose patience. Orochimaru continued ignoring him and remained motionless. Ryo found Orochimaru's behavior strange. Usually, even when he's busy, Orochimaru would always answer when it's Ryo that's asking. However, today, he didn't even turn around. A puppet. Ryo, who watched Orochimaru's peculiar behavior, remembered the corpse he had brought for Orochimaru before, and realized that the body before him was probably fake. He activated his Mangekyo, and used Ice World on Orochimaru. Just like he expected, Orochimaru's soul did not appear in the Ice World. With this, he had no doubt that what was before his eyes was the fruit of Orochimaru's latest research. Ryo approached the puppet. After observing it for a while, he reached out and touched its skin. What he did not expect was that not only did it feel exactly like human skin, it also had the body temperature of a human being. This made Ryo even more interested, so he took out his ice scalpel and cut the puppet's skin immediately. The result shocked him even more, the puppet started bleeding. How could this be? Haha, is my work that perfect, Ryo-kun? Orochimaru walked up from the lower floor smiling. Ryo nodded, as the puppet was too realistic by any standards. How did you do it, Orochi-san? Ryo asked curiously. It's thanks to the white corpse you've given me. I have found a special chakra in that corpse. Orochimaru said that, and took Ryo along with him to the lab's basement. He took a scroll that was on the table and handed it to Ryo. Ryo-kun, this is that chakra I'm talking about. Check it out yourself. Ryo nodded, opening the scroll, and observing the chakra within it with his Sharingan. Apart from a grass-green hue to it, it was just like ordinary chakra. Ryo-kun, go ahead and coat your body in this chakra, and then envision a chakra that you're familiar with. Orochimaru said. Ryo did so, and envisioned Minato's chakra. At that moment, Ryo's body started slowly changing shape, taking Minato's appearance. He used his mental power to perceive his body, and was stunned again into silence. This chakra had such a terrible effect. What Ryo actually perceived was Minato himself. Ryo-kun, try to use ninjutsu. Alright, I'll try. Ryo's right condensed a raise non. What was more surprising was that his chakra's fluctuation as he condensed the raise non was actually changed by the chakra that Orochimaru gave him. This made the raise non he made feel identical to that of Minato. The downside of the chakra was obvious to him, as he only maintained this shape for less than a minute, before it ran out. This made Ryo feel more surprise. He remembered well that Orochimaru's puppet lasted for a much longer time. How come his transformation is now time-limited? Orochi-san, how did you get your puppet to maintain shape for so long? Ryo asked directly. The white corpse you've given me contains a lot of the 1STS cells. I found that their strong vitality kept this chakra from being consumed. I've made the puppet outside relying on both 1STS cells and this chakra. So that's the case. Ryo-kun, there's even more special things about that corpse. Orochimaru said in his hoarse voice. What things? Asked Ryo. That corpse has no actual brain. It cannot contain a consciousness and a soul. No consciousness? How come I could talk to it when meeting? How come it tried to run away and fight? Ryo asked. Think about it. Your shadow clones can do the same. They can talk and flee and even use ninjutsu. Orochimaru answered faintly. Ryo was speechless for a moment. He looked down and thought it over for a while and then said, Orochi-san, you mean that these guys might all be controlled by one consciousness that occupies just one main body? Yes. But this is nothing but speculation at this point. I have no evidence. Orochimaru's words made Ryo understand details that never were clear to him. He was just about to say something when he suddenly felt that the teleportation barrier mark he gave Rin was destroyed. His face changed greatly, and immediately confirmed the position of the recently destroyed barrier. This gave him an approximate position of Rin. Realizing that she was in the wave country, Ryo immediately bid farewell to Orochimaru. Orochi-san, I have an urgent matter to deal with. I have to leave right away. Using the teleportation barrier on the borders of the fire country, Ryo got much closer to his teleportation barrier's position in the blink of an eye. With his teleportation barrier mark destroyed, and his ice scalpel really far, Ryo thought of using the teleportation barrier mark he had in the wave country, but he could not sense that. Therefore, he could only use ice teleportation and lightning chakra flicker to rush towards his target. When he entered the wave country, he could finally sense his ice scalpel, and subsequently teleport to it. By the time he reached, he found that it was thrown away on the floor. He picked up the ice scalpel, his ice lightning chakra mode broke out more fiercely, and he continued to rush in Rin's direction. Chapter 187, Ryo vs. Madara. Ryo used lightning chakra flicker to catch up with Rin. At this time, the mist ninjas had already taken her aboard a ship that was to go in the direction of the water country. The boat was much slower than a ninja, and Ryo was getting closer and closer. However, just when Ryo reached the shore, someone got in his way, a man who had long black hair, in a purple-blue attire and red armor. He had a pair of Mangekyo Sharinans exuding great pressure. Uchiha Madara. How could this be? Ryo's face was gloomy. He opened his Mangekyo to observe his opponent. He actually thought that it was Zetsu in disguise, but what was disturbing to him was that the Mangekyo did not seem to be fake, as it did indeed exude great power. So, Ryo Yamanaka, has our agreement come to an end so fast? Hearing Madara's voice, Ryo's heart went into turmoil. Is this really Madara? I don't remember Rin having anything to do with our deal, said Ryo. So, you must interfere with my plan. Madara's eyes exuded even more horrible power. Rin is my friend, and I really want to see the legendary power Madara Uchiha. Ryo was not convinced that the person before him was Madara, so he decided to go ahead and force him into his original shape. Ryo first started by using the Mangekyo to increase the speed of his Ice Lightning Chakra mode. This mode already granted him terrifying speed. Now with his eye boosting it, it was almost as if Ryo was actually teleporting. With such speed, even Madara's Mangekyo wasn't able to capture Ryo's movement. In his left hand, Ryo condensed a raise non, and went straight for Madara's body. Immediately, a row of blue ribs covered Madara's side. While he could not see Ryo's movement, his instinct made him summon Susanoo as soon as Ryo disappeared. After seeing Susanoo, Ryo's face changed greatly, as he realized that the person before him was indeed Madara. As Ryo was confused, the ribs continued to change, as arms grew out of them, followed by a skull that formed on top of them. Its empty sockets were filled with a yellow light. Ryo actually started trembling at this point, as this foe was nothing like any other he had ever faced. The changes in the Susanoo did not stop there. Flesh started to cover the skeleton, and at the same time, its legs were growing below. Ryo gulped, feeling the terror of the blue behemoth. Haha, this is my clan's ultimate skill. This Susanoo's destructive power is beyond anything you could imagine, a godly power before which you shall bow. Will you not give up, Ryo? Madara smiled. Korin, help me. In order to fight such a foe, Ryo could only rely on Korin's help. Hearing Ryo's call, Korin immediately used her chakra to wrap his body. The chakra was gradually condensed into the form of Korin, a prestigious water Kirin. What is this? Madara's face, which only showed arrogance and pride so far, suddenly showed great surprise for the first time since the battle started. As Korin was condensing, a water sphere was forming at the same time. The water was blended with a peculiar lightning chakra, and black lightning discolored the sphere. Rantan, lightning tide. Korin controlled the water sphere, smashing it against the Susanoo. The water sphere crashed against its body, and the Susanoo's muscles began to be corroded, revealing the skeleton underneath. Good opportunity. Ryo's eyes lit up and he condensed an ice bow. He quickly condensed an ice arrow and shuttled the surrounding natural energy madly into the small projectile. At the same time, he used his Mangekyo to enhance the arrow's attack. Korin saw Ryo preparing for such a big move, and she immediately increased the power of her lightning attack. Her purpose was to contain Madara's Susanoo to gain time for Ryo. With Korin's destruction, Ryo's arrow was finally completely filled. As soon as that happened, Ryo released the chakra string behind the arrow, sending it directly toward Madara, who was behind the Susanoo. As the arrow approached, Madara felt a deadly threat from this approaching item. Ha! Madara screamed, forcing the Susanoo out of Korin's lightning shackles, and the blue behemoth formed 2 extra arms, each holding a katana. Madara controlled his arms, adding 2 other swords, and all 4 arms went down on the upcoming arrow. The ice arrow's size was insignificant compared to the giant katana. However, its power was beyond all expectations. When the 2 weapons came into contact with each other, the ice arrow directly went through all 4 blades, piercing a hole into Susanoo's so-called absolute defense. The arrow went directly through the Susanoo's ribs, hitting Madara directly, and then, Ryo controlled it from afar. He made it bloom and crush immediately, crushing the entirety of Susanoo, along with Madara's body within it. At that moment, Ryo's Mangekyo spotted a black liquid-like substance dropping from Madara's body, and then disappearing into the ground in the blink of an eye. Ryo immediately entered Sage mode, wanting to locate the black substance and then capture it. However, the substance was moving too fast underground, and Sage mode could only sense its chakra, not its exact location. Its mobility and special chakra confirmed to Ryo that it was indeed Black Zetsu. This made Ryo feel relieved, as the amazing Madara at his peak had not appeared yet. Black Zetsu was obviously aware of Ryo's teleportation barrier that Rin carried. It seemed that this made him fear that Ryo was about to disrupt Madara plan. However, he could not directly tell Madara. Therefore, he had no choice but to try to drag Ryo on his own. It was no surprise for Ryo that Black Zetsu was able to imitate Madara, and even a Mangekyo Sharingan. After all, that he was Kagaya's third son, and anything could be expected out of him. Chapter 188, The Plan Begins. See underground. After the use of the mayfly technique to escape from Ryo, Black Zetsu had a portion of its body covered in ice crystals, and the scene was awkward. At this time, White Zetsu approached him saying, "Hey, aren't you going to stop Ryo Yamanaka? And why do you look so miserable? That Yamanaka? I don't know how he got this Biju-like creature, and he's already pretty strong himself. With the bit of power I've stolen from Nagato's eyes, I'm still no opponent of his." Black Zetsu said, rather angrily. "That's frighteningly powerful. You have part of Nagato's dojutsu power, and with your ability to use second stage Susanoo, and you still can't beat him." White was very surprised. T/N, the author had added Susanoo to Black Zetsu's arsenal as an ability that was never portrayed in the anime. Ryo Yamanaka and his Biju can use natural energy. With that, even my stage 2 Susanoo is not enough to resist them. As he mentioned natural energy, Black Zetsu's tone became even more serious. Besides the Juobi, Korin was the first Biju he saw using natural energy, and that made him worry. But this operation was not without gains. The girl was taken into the sea while Yu and Ryo were fighting. They have already gone a great distance. By the way, does the girl really carry space-time coordinates? I haven't found them after searching her thoroughly. White asked. Ryo Yamanaka is managing to somehow determine her location accurately, she definitely has them on her. I don't know what Ryo Yamanaka has done to hide them. Alright, but now the ship has gone too far, we shouldn't about it. Well, Ryo Yamanaka's time-space ninjutsu is not as strong as that of Minato. We should indeed be safe now. Black Zetsu nodded. Well, I'll go back to Madara-sama. Remember not to reveal any of this. I know. After saying that, White Zetsu vanished into the ground. Black and White Zetsu were very careful, but they forgot one thing, Ryo's ice teleportation. On the sea, Ryo in ice elementization froze water in the distance, then teleported to it relentlessly. In the 10 minutes Ryo spent dealing with Black Zetsu, Rin's ship went quite a distance into the sea. After a while chasing it, he finally was able to breathe a sigh of relief, as he spotted the ship. The next moment, Ryo disappeared from the sea. On the ship, Ryo blinked behind Rin. After a brief check, he determined that her state was not that bad, and that she only had some genjutsu cast upon her and had her chakra sealed. Later, Ryo sensed everyone's presence on the ship, determining that everyone around her was also under genjutsu. He lifted Rin's illusion, and she slowly opened her eyes. Rin looked around with confusion. She unconsciously wanted to use chakra, but found it to be sealed. Rin, don't worry, your chakra had been sealed by the mist ninjas, that's all. Hearing Ryo's voice behind her, she immediately turned back. Ryo, why are you here? Rin asked with some surprise. To save you. Remember? You were kidnapped by the hidden mist. How did you know that I was taken? Remember the scroll I gave you? Rin nodded. Ryo was indeed very serious when he gave her the scroll, and she had guessed that it was very important, so she held on to it. I have a time-space mark in that scroll. The scroll seals it out of my perception with an outside seal that's linked to my ice scalpel. If my ice scalpel gets destroyed or gets too far away from the scroll, I will start perceiving your location. So that's what it how. Thank you, Ryo. Rin, thanking me might have to wait for later. I have a plan, and I need your help. It's about Obito. Ryo talked very seriously to Rin. Obito? Isn't he dead? Rin shivered when she heard Ryo's words, and her eyes turned red instantly. Well, he's alive, and this could be either good or bad for him. It's all up to you. Me? What can I do? Rin was a little confused. Ryo did not answer, instead asking, Rin, do you like Obito? Hearing Ryo's question, Rin became a little confused. After a brief silence she said, like. I like Obito, I like Kakashi, I like why. Rin obviously misunderstood Ryo's question, and Ryo shook his head saying, I'm talking about another kind of liking, the kind that exists between lovers. Her face blushed instantly. I don't know. Rin's reluctance said a lot on its own. Ryo smiled and said nothing more about that, and had another thing to ask Rin. Rin, all you have to do is to continue your journey with these mist ninjas, and of course I will protect you from the sidelines. Will this help save Obito? Yes. Believe me. Then yes, I'll do anything. Rin's tone was very firm. Ryo nodded, and he had already expected that she would agree. He then went back to the deck and killed a mist ninja, transforming to his appearance. Then, he proceeded to throwing the ninja's corpse into the sea. Later, Ryo pretended to be in genjutsu like the other and stood on the deck. The ship sailed for another day or so before arriving at the port near the mist village. A jonin from the village had long been waiting on the shore. When the boat was docked, he got on the boat and immediately went into the cabin to take Rin away. As soon as he approached Rin, Ryo teleported right behind him, slitting his throat on the spot. Ryo read his memories, and then transformed to his appearance. Rin, in order to deceive the mist ninjas, I will use genjutsu on you. It will only make you sleep. After dealing with the mist ninja's corpse, Ryo notified Rin. Well, alright. Rin nodded and let Ryo use genjutsu on her. After carrying the sleeping Rin, Ryo got off the boat and walked to a small lake following the memories of the elite jonin. On the shore, Ryo saw two acquaintances, White Zetsu, looking like Yamada Nagakyu, and Yagura. Yagura looked the same as the last time when Ryo saw him. His eyes were not as dull as people usually are when under control. In the lake, Ryo saw the sanbai floating on the water's surface. The bit of its chakra that Ryo had taken was recovered. However, most of its soul was lost. It couldn't even control its body properly. The Biju could only sleep and slowly recover its soul. You should leave now. After Ryo put Rin down, the controlled Yagura ordered him to leave him alone with White Zetsu. Chapter 189, The Substitute. Yamada accompanied Ryo out of the forest. On his way out, Ryo wasn't idle, condensing ice flakes and throwing them along his way into the wood that's by the lake. Later, he entered the ice lightning chakra mode to enhance his perception, and tried to confirm if there were any other White Zetsu around the lake. Doing so, he found that there were many White Zetsu around the village. However, the only one in the lake's territory was Yamada. 3 more were scattered close by in the woods as well. Their number was so small around the lake, and it was great news for Ryo, as this should save him a lot of time. Because they were there however, he still had to use Shi's secret technique to hide his chakra, and then use the lightning chakra mode flicker to finish them off. In fact, Ryo's previous plan consisted of using Ice World to freeze Zetsu's consciousness, making sure they never pass any messages to Madara. However, his conversation with Orochimaru before he went to save Rin changed this plan, as he now started speculating that the White Zetsu had no individual consciousness for the most part. That meant that everything any single White Zetsu knows should be known by the main one. While Orochimaru's idea was just speculation for now, Ryo did not want to take any risks. Therefore, he changed his method to this. After being separated from White Zetsu, Ryo returned home basing off of the Jonin's memories. Later, using Sage Mode's enhanced perception, he determined that there were no White Zetsu around. Ryo used Shi's method to hide his chakra, and then teleported back to his ice flakes. White Zetsu's perception abilities were actually above those of an average sensor ninja. With just those 3 scattered around the lake, no wind Oregon grass could escape their perception into the lake. However, Ryo's use of Shi's technique, and his teleportation into the scene made him undetectable. Ryo first determined the 3 Zetsu's location, and then entered the forest. All 3 stood no chance against him. Now it's your turn. Ryo muttered to the lake as he watched Yagura preparing to seal the sanbai within Rin's body. People controlled by genjutsu usually have their senses dulled, listening only to their commander's order. This was obviously also true for Yagura. Otherwise, Madara wouldn't use those 3 White Zetsu to monitor the surroundings. As they were all killed by Ryo before communicating any warning or knowledge to the main body, to Madara and White Zetsu, they still survive normally. T/N, I believe the author is choosing to make the Zetsu communication system rather active, not passive. Meaning, the Zetsu could only convey information upon detection of change around them. In fact, Ryo also killed Yamada, and the only source left to feed Madara with information was Yagura. Under Madara's control, Yagura started preparing his seals, and as that was happening, Ryo suddenly appeared before his eyes. He already had his Mangekyo opened, using his left eye to boost his next jutsu, a genjutsu that was made to cover Madara's. The idea was actually inspired by Itachi's use of Kota Amatsukami to break out of Kabuto's Edo Tensei's control. The difference was that Ryo's genjutsu was not there to change Yagura's actions, but only to make his eyes look away from Rin. With that, his eyes became sluggish, but his movements did not change. Therefore, Madara did not notice a change, remaining in control of Yagura, who was to proceed to sealing the sanbai in Rin along with the seal to prevent her suicide. Ryo's next step was to take out a scroll, containing a semi-finished clone. This was a failed experiment of Ryo and Orochimaru when they were trying to perfect cloning technology, and it just came in handy. Ryo used his chakra to wrap the clone and change its shape, just like in the transforming jutsu. He made it look exactly like Rin. Later, Ryo switched the clone with Rin, taking her back to the ship she was brought from. In there, Ryo lifted his genjutsu upon her and unsealed her chakra. With that, she gradually regained consciousness. After her thorough waking, he returned to the Mist Village alone. In the village, ninjas were on patrol. As soon as Ryo appeared, he was immediately discovered by one of them. In fact, unlike before, Ryo wasn't willing to hide his existence this time. His purpose was actually to make things look like he could not save Rin, fooling Zetsu and Madara into believing that their plan is successful. It would just look like he chose to enter the Mist Village after his friend disappeared in the Wave Country, which would naturally make the Mist the first suspects. On the other hand, knowing that the Mist Village was about to become Madara's toy, Ryo did not mind weakening their ranks a bit in advance. In the center of the village, Ryo was surrounded by thousands of Mist ninjas. After great hesitation, everyone rushed at him. They did not dare to use water again, and they chose to fight using taijutsu. After all, memories of Ryo's last arrival into the village were still fresh, and images of their use of water release, along with his subsequent use of Ice Colossus, were still pinned in their mind. Seeing massive waves of ninjas going at him, Ryo did not panic. He surrounded his body with lightning chakra, slowly condensing armor around it. The lightning chakra mode itself was actually the basis of the Hokage's incredible defensive abilities. However, since Ryo had always lacked the chakra to use the mode this way, he abandoned the idea, focusing on using it only for speed. Now with Korin's help, Ryo was finally able to use this armor, and this was a perfect opportunity to test it out. The more chakra used for the lightning chakra mode, the higher its defensive capabilities become. With Korin's chakra sealed into his body, his lightning chakra mode was strong enough to make the surrounding mist ninjas taijutsu unable to cause any harm to Ryo. In the end, things went smoothly as he expected, and he was well noticed by the surrounding white Zetsu. In the pit 1,000 miles away, Madara learned about the matter from Zetsu beside him. Nothing seemed alarming about the matter, and it seemed that his plans were a complete success. Madara-sama, what should I do next? Keep an eye on Obito. After I finish sealing the sanbai within her, I'll make use of this girl to activate his Mangekyo. Yes, Madara-sama. I'm going to Obito right away. After finishing his words, Zetsu sank into the ground. Someone with such great love for the world, what kind of Mangekyo would he get when all that love turned into hatred? I can't wait to see. Madara talked to himself with a hint of excitement. Chapter 190, Facing the Mist once again. Madara controlled Yagura to seal the sanbai in Rin's body. After the sealing was finished, Yagura went to the village, leaving the lake. Through his eyes, Madara watched the battle between Ryo and the mist. With Korin's help, Ryo was able to imitate the third Hokage's lightning chakra mode, making himself able to use both the lightning armor and the lightning chakra flicker. With the support of Korin's massive chakra, his defensive power was no less than that of the third Hokage. While he wasn't as skilled with taijutsu, Ryo made up for that with his incredible speed. Therefore, the battle between him and the rest of the mist was completely one-sided. Ryo was like a human bulldozer, taking down many mist ninjas with every one of his attacks. 1,000 miles away, Madara's face was somewhat heavy. He had chosen the mist village as a base for his power, and did not want Ryo Yamanaka to destroy it so carelessly. Thinking of that, he controlled Yagura to rush at Ryo. Being fully aware of that, Ryo was quite surprised that Madara finally decided to interfere. Yagura himself was caged here, and was able to beat all people in the village to get this position. He was actually a rather strong Kage tier. Now that he's under Madara's control, he gained the veteran's accumulated experience from the battles during a warring states period, which was far beyond his or even Ryo's. This experience made up for the gap between him and Ryo on terms of strength and speed. Yagura, controlled by Madara, seemed to be fighting with a pair of Shrinon, avoiding every one of Ryo's attacks in advance. That's the fourth Raikage for you. But do you have a way to block this? Ryo's lightning chakra mode intensified, and he extended 2 fingers from his right hand. Hell stab! Quickly, spread out! Yagura, controlled by Madara, immediately warned the surrounding mist ninjas. Madara knew all very well that Ryo's target was not him, but the ninjas behind him. Like Ryo said, he had no way to keep this technique from hitting them with Yagura's abilities. In the Hell Stab, lightning chakra is continuously compressed and focused at the fingertips. That, along with the speed brought by the lightning chakra mode, creates a massive destructive power that is capable of penetration everything. The technique was not that difficult to learn, but it had great requirements in speed and physical fitness. It was not used previously by Ryo. However, after changing his genetic arrangement, Ryo's vitality made his body finally capable of supporting this jutsu. The violent lightning chakra continually gathered on Ryo's 2 fingers. After reaching the extreme, Ryo's body turned into a spear of lightning. Water wall. Madara made Yagura's body form several water walls to reduce Hell Stab's penetrative capabilities. Unfortunately for him, the walls had no effect at all, immediately broken through by Ryo, and Madara only saw a flash of lightning passing by Yagura's body. Boom! What was surprising was that the attack did not land on one mist ninja. Turning around, Ryo retracted 1 finger, making the lightning chakra converge towards the remaining one. Hell Stab goes up in power when using fewer fingers. Seeing Ryo's 2-finger attack creating such mayhem, everyone froze thinking of his single-finger attack. Madara knew by now that he could not face Ryo with Yagura's body, otherwise the mist village itself would be in great danger. What on earth do you want, Ryo Yamanaka? You're breaking into our village all of a sudden, do you want to provoke a new shinobi world war? Madara controlled Yagura to speak. This made Ryo realize that his purpose had been reached. Now, he had no more reason to attack the mist, as their losses had reached the limit of what Madara could bear. However, he had to finish the act. If he was to simply leave, Madara would have some doubts. At this thought, Ryo pretended to be furious. You know what you've done? Where on earth is Rin? We have not seen any Rin, no one even knows Rin. Is that so? My companion was gone missing in the Wave Country, and isn't that subsidiary to your own? You're saying you don't know? It seems that I have not done enough. Ryo pretended to continue his attack. Madara had a massive headache. It was obvious that Ryo wasn't going to stop until finding that girl, but she was crucial to his plans. He couldn't just give her to Ryo, so he didn't want to give up. After some thought, Madara sighed. The situation was beyond using a man, and he could only use one of the cards hidden up his sleeves. He summoned a Zetsu, making his prepare a new pair of Sharinon. Madara had finally decided to use the bit he had left of his Rinnegan's power. Ryo felt that the situation was awkward. Did Madara give up on the Mist Village? Why did he not answer for so long? With him not speaking, Ryo wasn't going to wait forever. After finishing his preparations, he rushed with Hell Stab directly at Yagura's body. What made Ryo more surprised that Yagura was not evading the attack, and not even using ninjutsu. Ryo already reached Yagura's front. The powerful lightning surge made Yagura's hair stand up. Did Madara really give up on the Mist Village? Ryo's face was gloomy. If he was to kill the 4THS Mizukage, the Fourth World War would definitely erupt in advance. Is that what Madara is thinking? Just trying to gather water that had been spilled, Ryo tried to stop his attack, and his could not do it in time. As he watched Hell Stab about to go through Yagura's body, all the lightning chakra in Ryo's body disappeared strangely. Immediately after, a strong repulsive power broke out of Yagura's body, pushing Ryo away. Ryo remained in mid-air for a while before finally falling on the ground. As he stood up, he saw Yagura relieved and relaxed. Ryo's face became gloomy, for what Madara just used was akin to the power of the Rinnegan. Absorbing his lighting chakra reminded him of the Preta path, and the way he was pushed away was like that of the Deva path. Madara's ability to use the Rinnegan was rather strange, as he already given his eyes to Nagato a long time ago. Ryo had seen Nagato in the Rain Country before, and he clearly had the Rinnegan. Ryo returned the center of the village. In order to verify his conjecture, he used several ninjutsu in a row, and they all disappeared in the vicinity of Yagura, with their chakras seemingly entering his body. It's really the Rinnegan. Chapter 191, Rinnegan and Ice Release. The Rinnegan is one of the three great dojutsu and is reputed as the most exalted eye amongst the three. Its power goes far beyond that the Byakugan or Sharingan. The Rinnegan grants its wielder the ability to use of all five nature transformations, along with yin and yang. It also has its own range of abilities, and even the ability to reverse life and death. The Rinnegan's signature abilities were the ones shown by the 6 paths of pain in the manga, along with the outer path used by Nagato himself. On top of those abilities, each pair of Rinnegan has its own proprietary jutsu. For example, Madara's Limbo, and Sasuke's Ame and Otajikara are their own unique Rinnegan techniques. Nagato had created the 6 paths of pain, with each of them freely manipulating one of the 6 paths' power. When watching the anime, Ryo presumed that the Rinnegan power could be divided regardless of ability, just like its abilities could be split between paths. Today, Madara's use of the Rinnegan confirmed to Ryo his previous speculation. Ryo guessed that Madara, in order to do this, should have retained some of his Rinnegan's power after giving his eyes to Nagato. The problem is that Ryo had no idea how much power Madara retained, or which of the Rinnegan's techniques he retained. Therefore, just to be safe, he stopped his attacks. In his pit, as Madara used the Rinnegan's power, his 3-tomo Sharingan quickly lost its brilliance, and its pupils started turning grayish-white. Zetsu, is the new Sharingan pair ready? Madara said. Ready, Madara-sama. That's good, wait for the end of this to start changing these. After finishing his words, Madara closed his eyes. In the Mist Village, Yagura, controlled by Madara, trembled and then raised his right hand, releasing a strong attractive force at Ryo. Bansho Tenin. Being fully aware of the Rinnegan's capabilities, Ryo left an ice scalpel in place, and then did not resist Madara's attractive force. Seeing no struggle from Ryo's side, Madara had a feeling that something was wrong, but he did not stop. Instead, he gathered a black rod in Yagura's left hand while activating the Prita path. Ryo let himself get closer, then threw an ice scalpel at Yagura, being one step ahead before the black rod hit him. When Ryo was testing Madara's Rinnegan ability, he used an ice jutsu that got close to Yagura. Of course, the Prita path interacted with it, but it did not immediately disappear. Therefore, when Yagura used Bansho Tenin, Ryo did not resist and let him pull him. He wanted to use his Sharingan to determine how resistant his ice could be to the Rinnegan's power. He opened his Sharingan and observed the ice scalpel. Facing the Prita path, the ice scalpel did not disappear. Instead, what happened was that it lost some of its size. With his Sharingan, Ryo saw that the natural energy of the ice scalpel was being absorbed. However, since his ice's internal structure was too stable, this loss in natural energy was very slow. In the end, Yagura did not completely absorb the scalpel. Instead, it actually stabbed him in his right shoulder. After determining the approximate speed at which his ice release was absorbed, Ryo teleported immediately to his initial position. Mizukage-sama, it seems that your jutsu is not without flaws. Ryo shouted to Yagura. Yagura's face remained unfazed, but Madara's was much gloomier. Since he developed the Rinnegan, this was the first time a ninjutsu escaped it Prita path. Madara did not expect that even with the Rinnegan, he'd still have no way to take down Ryo with the mist ninjas under his control. He was actually confident in victory with him taking the initiative. He felt eager to use all the power he had stored just to take down Ryo. However, he knew that there might be a time when he needs that power, so he had to give up on this idea. Ryo Yamanaka, we really haven't seen you, companion. Although the Wave Country is subsidiary to Outs, this matter really has nothing to do with us. Hearing Madara seeking peace, Ryo hummed. He did not want to fight. All he wanted to achieve in this village had been done, and he even got to expose some of Madara's well-hidden cards. It didn't make any sense for him to fight anymore. Rin was still on the ship. If she was to be discovered by any other mist ninjas, all his plans would be defeated. At this thought, Ryo said, even if you are not responsible, Rin was lost in your territory. You must give me a proper compensation. Ryo's attitude changed so quickly, it took Madara by surprise. Although somewhat doubtful, he could only overlook the matter to keep his interests and plans for Rin and the village going. You can rest assured that we will send people after your companion, and tell whenever we have an update. Yagura said quickly. Ryo pretended to think about it, only to agree after a few minutes. With their consensus, Ryo pretended to leave the village, and went back to take Rin from the boat. In the pit, Madara wiped the tears and blood off his eye. White, tell me all you know about Ryo Yamanaka's ice. Yes, Madara-sama. As far as we know, his ice is a Kekii Genkai unique to him. He could combine it with natural energy, and it's much harder than that of the Yuki clan. Immediately, White Zetsu answered Madara with all he knew about the matter. Madara was not satisfied after listening. Zetsu's information didn't give anything new. He had just fought Ryo through Yagura, and Ryo's ice release and ice teleportation were not that simple. White, we should pay more attention to Ryo Yamanaka in the future. He may be more talented than I ever imagined. Perhaps he could become the greatest obstacle to my plan. White was a bit surprised, for Madara, who had always focused on leading figures, was paying so much attention to Ryo. In fact, in all the years he served under Madara, this was the highest praise he ever heard him say about anyone. Therefore, Zetsu became a little intrigued. After that, Zetsu gave the Sharinans to Madara. After the latter switched his eyes, he closed them and ignored everything to rest in his chair. Chapter 192, Reunion with Pakura. On the vast sea, Ryo was holding the fatigued Rin as the two marched through the ice path he was creating underneath their feet. After leaving the village, the two marched for a long time. Her chakra had already bottomed out, and Ryo could only hold her all the way through. All the way, Rin clearly looked like she had something to say, but she kept quiet. Ryo was not that smart with emotions, and could not guess what was going through her mind, so he had no questions to ask. In the end, Rin couldn't help it. Ryo, what were you doing in the mist village? Ryo looked at her with some surprise, for this question didn't sound like one she would hesitate for so long before asking. Nothing, just fighting the village. He answered with a smile. Rin did ask about more, but kept her head down and didn't know what to think. At some point, Ryo could teleport to the wave country. In order to bring back Obito, he just couldn't return to Konoha. It would be detrimental if Rin was to be noticed again before Madara starts his plan. Ryo entered Sage mode, and after confirming the absence of any mist ninjas or Zetsu, Ryo decided to rest with Rin for a while in the wave country. The Rin that was left in the mist village was a failed clone, one that's in a vegetative state, with life but no consciousness. But Ryo had his use for it. Ryo was able to keep it transformed for a long time after his departure, and the powerful vitality he had in his chakra played a certain role in that. Yagura, controlled by Madara, did not examine it with the Sharinan. Since Rin was supposed to be unconscious under the effect of Genjutsu, the clone was perfect in its state for playing her role. Rin, next, I'll be taking you to the Sand Village. The Kazekige's consultant, Pakura, is a friend of mine. You can stay there with peace of mind, and I'll pick you up later. Ryo said as he handed Rin a food pill. All right. Ryo. I know the answer to that question you've asked me before. Rin's voice was very faint, and Ryo guessed exactly what she was talking about. My question? About Obito. Hearing Ryo, Rin's face immediately turned red. After a while, she said in a low but very firm voice, I like Obito, I like him in that way. Is that so? Well, I'll have to congratulate him then. Ryo sounded very gratified. In the past, as he watched the anime, Ryo was very sympathetic to both Rin and Obito. However, he never heard a confession from Rin while watching. On top of that, there was Kakashi between the two, and the matter was rather controversial. However, all the way, Ryo was rooting for the two, and thinking Rin actually loved Obito. He saw her feeling towards Kakashi as more of a crush, or more of worship towards the young genius. Rin, you can rest assured. I will definitely bring him back to you. Also, that Obito is better than any other peer I've met in middle school. Ryo said with a smile. Rin had no idea what Ryo meant by his second sentence, but the first half of what he said was very clear, so she showed a bright smile. She had blind trust in Ryo, and he was one of her best friends. To her, he was even more like a sensei, one she has known since childhood, and who is a good friend. After a short break, the two continued their trip. They had to go to the border of the fire country before being able to use the teleportation barrier to teleport to the wind country. Along the way, Ryo was perceiving the surroundings, carefully avoiding all the ninjas that came in their way. After reaching the borders, the two teleported to the wind country, and then went immediately to Pakura's place. During the day, Pakura was on duty, being the Konoha's consultant. She was nowhere to be found inside the house. Ryo was in no way acting like a guest, entering with Rin immediately into the house. "Rin, no need to be so polite, suit yourself." Ryo laid down on the sofa. "Ryo, we shouldn't." Rin was a little nervous, especially because she knew that this house belonged to the Konoha's consultant. Could they really afford to act so casually? "Don't worry, Pakura is my friend. You don't have to be so polite." After he finished his words, he reached for the fruits on the plate before him. Rin still didn't sit down, preferring to remain standing on the side. After a while, she returned from shopping. As soon as she opened the door, she was greeted by Ryo on the sofa. "Ryo! What brings you here?" The ingredients in She's hands fell to the ground as she was startled, then she asked. "Hey! I'm looking for Pakura for something. I'll introduce you to, this is my classmate, Rin, and this is Pakura's sister, She." After the two got to know each other, She asked Rin to take a seat if she wanted, and the latter was finally able to do so after getting permission from one of the house's inhabitants. "She, how have you been recently?" asked Ryo. "I've been doing great. I kinda miss Aunt Chintz though." As Ryo and She talked, Rin looked curiously at the two. The woman before her knew Ryo well, and was even familiar with his mother, Chintz. This familiarity helped Rin relax a lot. After Pakura became the village's consultant, she became busy every day, and usually only returned home at night. Today was no exception. Later, after Pakura returned home, she found an uninvited guest. "What brings you here?" she said to Ryo with a very dull voice. "Hey, why so cold?" Ryo was somewhat dissatisfied with her tone. Aren't they friends now? Shouldn't she sound a little more excited? "You're here for something, and I know it's not going to be good. It's good that I'm not kicking you out." Ryo scratched his head awkwardly, she definitely was not wrong. "Alright, stop the arguing. Sit down to eat." She stood up to separate the two. After Pakura finished eating, she and Ryo went to her office. There, Ryo told her a lot about the matter of Obito, while concealing the matter of Madara Uchiha. "Then, why don't you just take your friend out directly?" Pakura felt the matter was strange. "It's because I'm relying on this person to help activate my friend's Mangekyo Sharingan." "Mangekyo Sharingan? So the three Tomo Sharingan can really continue to evolve?" Pakura said with surprise. "Can really? Do you know about the Sharingan?" "Well, we have some records on them. The first Hokage once noted that Madara Uchiha's Sharingan was not the usual three Tomo Sharingan, concluding that the three Tomo Sharingan was not the final stage that the dojutsu could hit." Ryo had no reason to hide the matter of his Mangekyo from Pakura. He took off his contact lenses, and then activated his Mangekyo. She looked at the six-pointed star pattern on Ryo's pupils, and was speechless for a moment. The guy actually had a Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 193, The Greatest Secret in the World. "Before, a spy of ours in Konoha had delivered the news that you have the Uchiha's Kekii Genkai. I knew that you had the Sharingan, but to think that what you had goes even beyond that," Pakura said helplessly. Ryo saw Pakura in awe of his power, and started laughing out loud. "Stop being so arrogant, and tell me all about the Mangekyo in detail," she said to him. He nodded and said, "Well, there's nothing much to say about it. As I've told you, the Mangekyo is result of the Sharingan's evolution. Therefore, it boosts all of its capabilities, dynamic vision, insight, and genjutsu. However, it also grants the wielder a unique ability." "Unique ability?" Pakura immediately went on the keyword in Ryo's answer. "Well, each pair of Mangekyo has its own ability, so one can't guess what it would be." Ryo hesitated for a while, and then opted not to expose his own ability. Pakura was understanding and did not ask more. "Ryo, while you were talking earlier, you mentioned the term Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. What's that?" Pakura thought for a while, and then asked. "I'll tell you about that later, it is not yet the time for that. Ryo did not reveal anything about the eternal Mangekyo Sharinon, as he had his own plans concerning that. Well, one more question. What's the relationship between the Sharinon and the Rin-Egan? Ryo was taken by surprise as he heard that question, for he never expected Pakura to ask questions about the Rin-Egan. What, you can't tell me about this? Pakura looked proudly at the muddled Ryo. Why did you bring the Rin-Egan up? Ryo asked. It's because of the fact that out of the 3 great dojutsu, only the Rikudo Senin's Rin-Egan has not appeared in our age. You've been talking about the Sharingan's evolution, so I thought that perhaps the Rin-Egan is the following step. You're too smart. Women this smart don't find love, you know. Well, unfortunately, you guessed wrong. The 2 eyes are separate dojutsu, the Rin-Egan is not a natural evolution of the Sharinon. No? Well, is there any relationship between the 2? Pakura did not expect that her guess was wrong. They are not exactly separate. Pakura, what I'm about to tell you the biggest secret in the world. You're my nakama, and you have the right to know this. In the middle of his sentence, Ryo's tone became very serious, and Pakura felt how tense the situation was. You can rest assured, I'll never say anything. Ryo nodded and said, over a millennium ago, this world had no chakra-wielding people. That lasted until one day, a mysterious celestial being consumed the fruit of the god tree and became the first wielder of chakra on earth. The woman was the progenitor of chakra, Kagaya Atsutsuki. Pakuras looked at Ryo in awe, he seemed to be talking about some sort of myth. However, he didn't pay attention to her expression and continued. Kagaya had the Byakugan naturally. On top of that, she gained the Rhine Sharinon upon eating the fruit of the god tree. After that, she gave birth to 2 children. One was named Hago Romo, and he inherited chakra and the Rin-Egan, while the other was named Hamura, and he inherited the Byakugan and chakra. Wait a minute, the first one with the Rin-Egan should be the Rikudo Senin, no? How come you're telling me now that it's this Hago Romo guy? Pakura interrupted Ryo. Well, that's because Hago Romo is the Rikudo Senin. Ryo then concealed the matter of the Biju, but told Pakura about the origin of the Sharinon. From Ryo, Pakura learned that the Rikudo Senin had 2 sons. The eldest, Indra, inherited his father's powerful chakra and spiritual energy, along with his own dojutsu, having the yin power of his father. The second, Ashura, inherited his father's body, his physical power, and his yang power. The 2 sons had a rivalry to succeed their father. This confrontation lasted for many years, exceeding the 2 to their descendants, who had also inherited their power one generation after another. So the Uchiha and the Senju are the descendants of the Rikudo Senin. No wonder they were that strong during the Warring States period. Pakura sighed. Well, bloodline is important, giving tremendous power indeed. But its power is not absolute, said Ryo. Then what? According to what you just said, Indra and Ashura should not have the Rin-Egan. Pakura did not argue with Ryo, and instead returned to the matter of the Rin-Egan. Indeed. Indra and Ashura's chakra were passed down through generations, and they've been destined to fight each other again and again. Ryo continued, a reincarnation of each of them would be born again and again. I believe that combining these reincarnations chakra could lead to the rebirth of the Rikudo Senin's power. This combination of yin and yang would bring along his dojutsu as well, the Rin-Egan. Does that mean that anyone having the fusion of their 2 chakras will have a Rin-Egan? Pakura asked thoughtfully. I am not sure about that, but to have the Rin-Egan, one needs chakra from both indeed. Ryo answered after some thought. Ryo was not sure if any fusion of the 2 chakras would give birth to the Rin-Egan. Yes, Madara did have the Rin-Egan, and it did not replace the Sharinon, or have its properties. Whenever he wanted to use jutsus from both dojutsu, he had to switch back and forth. This made Ryo certain that the 2 dojutsu were independent, not evolution of each other. Also, on top of this, Ryo concluded that perhaps, having the Sharinon might not be a condition to activate the Rin-Egan. However, the 2 with Rin-Egan in the manga, Sasuke and Madara, were both Indra's reincarnations, both wielding eternal Mangekyo Sharinons. Therefore, Ryo wasn't hasty to make a conclusion. Pakura could not stay calm after hearing Ryo talk for such a long time. What he had said changed her perspective on the whole world. Kagaya, the progenitor of chakra, Hago Romo, the Rikudo Senin, such myths did exist. On top of that, all 3 great dojutsu were inextricably linked to these figures. Ryo thought it would take Pakura long to accept the matter, but he never expected her to regain her composure as quickly as she did. In fact, while all this history sounded very shocking, it was just that, history, not affecting the current ninja world to Pakura's knowledge. Therefore, she quickly calmed down. Now that I know all of this, what did bring you to me, Ryo? Pakura took the subject back to Ryo's main purpose. Yet, I want you to take care of Rin for a while, until I come back to pick her up. Is this related to your friend gaining the Mangekyo Sharingan? Pakura asked tentatively. Ryo actually didn't hide anything, nodding his head immediately. All right. I'll take care of her. After some quick thought, Pakura agreed to take care of Rin. Chapter 194, The Haxabee's Horn. See, after settling Rin's matter, Ryo immediately returned to Konoha. By this time, Rin's rescue mission allowed him to understand two of his weaknesses. One was that he wasn't skilled enough with time-space ninjutsu, and the other was his lack of mastery of his own Sharingan. For short distances, Ryo's ice teleportation was good enough, and at least on par with the Flying Thunder God. However, for long distances, if Minato didn't teach him how to use the teleportation barrier, he wouldn't be able to go so far. Even with that technique, Ryo still had limits on the distances he could travel. If he was as skilled as Minato with this technique, being able to teleport disregarding the distance, this rescue mission could have been much easier. As for his lack of mastery over his Sharingan, it was mainly due to lack of use. Now with the sudden opening of his Mangekyo, he was even less accustomed to his dojutsu. This was a very clear problem. While he was able to find a way around the risks brought by the use of his Mangekyo, he still couldn't use it to his full extent. He couldn't even use any form of Susanoo yet, just as an example. However, Ryo didn't have much time to take care of these two problems. He had very important things to take care of first. After returning to Konoha, Ryo went immediately to Orochimaru's lab. At this time, Orochimaru was still studying the white corpse that Ryo's had brought him, as it was intriguing him greatly. Orochi-san, did you find anything new today? Ryo looked at the busy Orochimaru. Hearing Ryo, Orochimaru put his work to a halt, giving Ryo rather weird look. After some hesitation, he finally said, Ryo-kun, according to my findings over the course of the past 2 days, I can only conclude that this body used to be that of a human. Ryo's heart was shook, and it appeared on his face. Never in his life did he expect that Orochimaru would actually find out this fact just through experimenting with a Zetsu clone corpse. Orochimaru, who saw Ryo's expression, thought he was just shocked by the fact, just like he was when first finding out about the matter. Ryo-kun, you may find it incredible, but according to my test results, this corpse is indeed of human origin. In fact, Ryo absolutely believed Orochimaru's words. He knew from the manga that white Zetsus are nothing but what a human turns into after being subject to the infinite Tsukuyomi. Orochi-san, this finding, is it useful for us in any way? Ryo asked. Of course it is. If nothing else, this is a unique kind of transformation, one we could understand and develop. Orochimaru licked his lips in excitement. Ryo was excited by the idea, and white Zetsu did indeed have many intriguing special abilities. However, he did show excitement for long. He did not come to discuss Zetsu's matter, but for other purposes. Orochi-san, I have something to ask you. Ryo said with a serious tone. What is it? Orochimaru was still in his good mood. Don't you have a horn of the Haxabee? Hearing Ryo, Orochimaru was stunned at first, and then asked, Ryo-kun, how do you know about this? Ryo had no intention to conceal anything, and told Orochimaru the truth of the matter. In fact, Ryo learned about this fact also thanks to Pakura. While he was in the Sand Village, she told him that the Sand Spies have spotted Orochimaru in the Cloud Village with a strange horn-shaped item, during the Second Shinobi World War. It was no secret that the Haxabee was missing a horn in all his subsequent appearances. Therefore, Pakura immediately thought that it was the Haxabee's horn that was with Orochimaru. She knew that Ryo was collecting the chakra of the Biju, so she told him about the matter while he was at her place. Hearing Ryo's explanation, Orochimaru joked around with him, you have many sources of intelligence, Ryo-kun. What did you do to get Pakura, the Sand's one and only counselor, to give you such information? With his relationship to Jiraiya, Orochimaru certainly knew that Ryo had spared Pakura's life once during battle in the Wind Country. Now as he learned that Pakura was giving Ryo intelligence, he actually became curious about the relationship between the two. Orochi-san, Pakura is just my friend. Don't overthink the matter. Ryo explained to Orochimaru. Orochimaru smiled and didn't hold on to this topic, but went on to talk about the Haxabee's horn. Ryo-kun, I can give you the Haxabee's horn, but I need the rest of this guy's body. T/N, the whole thing about Orochimaru unleashing the Haxabee to take a sample from his horn is not canon. In the anime, Orochimaru just scratched the beast's horn to extract its cells. It seems here that the author has decided to ignore that filler and get Orochimaru to have the entire horn, which makes more sense as he could just seal the whole thing being so proficient in Fuinjutsu. Orochimaru was pointing to Zetsu's arm on the table, as he guessed that Ryo might have the rest of his body stored. Hearing Orochimaru's condition, Ryo proceeded immediately to taking out 3 whole corpses directly from a scroll he had on, handing them over to Orochimaru. Orochimaru was rather surprised. What he initially wanted was just 1 corpse, and Ryo gave 3 at once. Ryo-kun, how many of these corpses do you have? I still have 2 more, but I'll be needing those. I don't think you need more than these 3, Orochi-san. Orochimaru sighed, as he did want more, but these 3 that Ryo gave were indeed more enough for his foreseeable research. Ryo-kun, come with me. After Orochimaru sealed the corpses, he left the lab with Ryo. In fact, he took him all the way out of Konoha. After taking a few steps into the woods, Orochimaru stopped near a pile of stones, and then undid some surrounding seals and barriers, and a small appeared on the ground. After opening the gate, he and Ryo went underground. Ryo was rather surprised to see all of this. There was a lot of space here, with many peculiar things. Ryo was curious, looking around eagerly, but Orochimaru wasn't about to take him on a tour, but instead led him to the 2nd floor. On the 2nd floor of the base, at Ryo's first glance, he saw the Haxabee's horn placed inside a massive glass container. The Haxabee's horn was close to the 2, but Ryo could not feel any of the Haxabee's chakra. Ryo-kun, the Haxabee's chakra in this horn needs to be refined and extracted. The way to do that is, Orochimaru explained the method to Ryo. After that, he sealed the horn within a scroll and handed it to Ryo. After getting the Haxabee's horn, Ryo hurriedly bid farewell to Orochimaru, and then immediately teleported to the cave where Korin was born in the Forest of Death. Following Orochimaru's instructions, Ryo began to extract the Haxabee's chakra from the horn. The chakra's continuous extracting went under Ryo's control, and after it reached a certain amount, Ryo summoned Korin to inject the chakra into her body. Chapter 195, Korin's Transformation. The Haxabee's chakra gradually flowed into Korin's body, and she began to conduct it to fuse with her own. As that was happening, Ryo felt strong vitality being emitted by Korin's body. This vitality was closer to that brought by Yang Chakra from the vitality that he gained through the genetic modification he conducted upon himself. Under Korin's feet, the cave's moss was affected by her vitality and began to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, Ryo had no clear spot to set foot in. Ryo perceived that this vitality was getting stronger as the integration of the Haxabee's chakra was progressing. Korin's body also began to be affected by this. She was already massive in size, but now she was getting too big for the cave. Ryo had no choice but to teleport with her to the Fire Country's borders. Korin's body stopped growing when she became about the same size as other Biju. Her body was only half their size before, and now she was comparable in size to any of them. The amount of chakra in Korin's body also increased as her body was getting larger, with the natural energy proportion of her chakra increasing to around 70%. Ryo felt that this was rather strange. Why didn't such great changes occur when he gave her the Rokubi's chakra? Ryo was puzzled by this, but for the time being, he could only wait for Korin to fully integrate the Haxabee's chakra into her own and then ask her. Around a minute later, the process was finally complete. Korin slowly opened her eyes, looking at her own body with some curiosity. Apparently, she was rather surprised by the changes it received. After adapting to her body, Ryo couldn't wait to ask, Korin, how do you feel? How do I feel? I feel good. I feel great power within my body, and it seems like I might be able to use a new ability. What ability? Ryo asked interestingly. Ryo, I'll try it out, but you should step back. Korin closed her eyes. She controlled her chakra while activating the water and earth properties. She then mobilized her vitality, and her appearance started changing into that of a tree that's over 10 meters high. Seeing this, Ryo could barely keep himself still. Knowing that the god tree in the manga was practically the Juobi's body, he wondered if this transformation meant that Korin was transforming into a new complete Juobi. He wanted to examine the tree that Korin became, but suddenly the scent of a flower reached his nose. He felt strange, looked up and saw orange flowers growing on Korin's trunk. These flowers were exuding an unusual scent, one that made him feel that his body was light, floating. Ryo started feeling dizzy after a while. He realized that there was something wrong with this floral fragrance. He immediately bit his tongue, forcing himself to wake up. Well Korin, I know your ability now. Revert to your initial state please. Ryo was actually almost taken down by the scent. Hearing his words, Korin cut off the process she activated to transform into the tree, and soon returned to her initial water Kirin appearance. Korin, you've used these flowers, can you use other wood jutsus? Ryo asked. Korin closed her eyes, trying for a long time before finally saying to Ryo, no. Her answer made Ryo doubtful. Isn't her technique similar to Hashirama's Mokuton? Later, Ryo understood from Korin that her technique was not a Hashirama-style Mokuton ninjutsu. In fact, the flowers were more of a defense mechanism that she used in her tree state. Well, Korin, how come the fusion with the Hakusebi's chakra caused so much change this time around? Ryo asked curiously. That is because the Hakusebi's chakra is of yang nature. Korin answered very calmly. Ryo had yet another surprise. He had never thought that the Hakusebi's chakra would turn out to be yang chakra, but then he thought about it, and in the manga the beast mainly used to rely on the physical attacks, his ink and Biju Dama. Him having yang chakra made absolute sense. Korin, that is to say, you have yang release now. Korin nodded. Hearing this news, Ryo became excited. Today, Korin, who absorbed the Hakusebi's chakra, gave him too many surprises. She gained strong vitality, her chakra amount increased greatly, she learned how to enter a state similar to that of the god tree, and she gained yang release. Now she had water, fire, wind, lightning, earth, and yang. All she needed now was to develop yang release. Ryo was sure that this relied mainly on her absorbing chakra from both the Nibi and the Nanabi. Ryo couldn't wait to do just that, to be able to turn Korin into a being that's similar to the complete Juobi. However, he had to forget such ideas for now. After all, he had no idea where the Nanabi was, and while he knew all about the Nibi, he couldn't just go there and take its chakra by force. With his current level, even with help from Korin, he couldn't just deal with the entirety of the Cloud Village protecting the Nibi with them having the Hakusebi besides his target. The Hakusebi was second only to Kurama in both power and chakra amount. Even after the transformation, Korin shouldn't be able to take down Jayaki. Even if she could, Ryo trying to face a Ujito Nii, and the rest of the Cloud Village is just asking for death. Therefore, he could only forget about the matter and wait for an opportunity calmly. While he was immersed in the joy brought by Korin's evolution, news that a beast had appeared on the borders of the Fire Country reached Konoha ninjas. Because of the upcoming Hokage's approaching wedding, Konoha naturally strengthened its patrols around the village and on the borders of the country. After teleporting from the Forest of Death to the borders, Ryo was discovered by a Hyuga patrol ninja as soon as he appeared. He was shocked to see Korin. Her body was as horrifying as the sea on a stormy day, and the amount of chakras she had was incredible and scary. The Hyuga ninja had participated in the Third World War, and saw the Ichibai, the Nibi, and the Gobi on the battlefield. What surprised him was that Korin's chakra exceeded all three of them. The situation was urgent, and he rushed back to Konoha. Chapter 196, The Repercussions. The Hyuga ninja, named Kenichi, rushed back to Konoha, running straight to the 3RDS office. After the guard confirmed his identity at the entrance, he took his straight to the Hokage. At this time, the third, Jiraiya and Minato were all in the office, and Kenichi who entered through the door felt under great pressure in the presence of all of them. Minato said with his signature smile, "Don't be nervous. You can say what you want to the Hokage-sama." Minato's comforting made the ninja feel a lot more at ease. He gratefully bowed to him, and then reported what he saw to the third. "Hokage-sama, I was on patrol around the southern borders of the Fire Country today, and I've detected the presence of a potential Biju." "What?" The 3RDS face changed heavily. Jiraiya and Minato also were gloomy as they exchanged looks. "Kenichi, how many tails does it have? Did you get an estimation of its chakra levels?" Jiraiya asked. "Jiraiya-sama, it actually has only one tail, but more chakra than the Gobi when I saw it last time," the Hyuga answered. What? Then, it is not a bijou. Jiraiya felt that this disproportion was rather strange. Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-sensei, let me go and check this out. Minato volunteered to investigate the matter. Yeah, that's a good idea. With your flying thunder god, you can escape immediately in case things turn ugly. Jiraiya agreed. Alright. Kenichi, you go with Minato, and show his the exact location, the third also agreed. Minato nodded, and placed on hand on Kenichi's shoulder and prepared to use his teleportation barrier to get to the southern borders of the Fire Country. Hold on 1 minute. You should take Kushina along, just to be on the safe side. The third stopped Minato. The latter was actually reluctant to put Kushina in danger, so he just wanted to reject the request. However, the third continued, don't forget, Minato is now the Kyuubi's perfect Jinchuriki. In brute power, she actually surpasses you. His words left Minato no space to argue, and he could only pass by the third training ground to pick up Kushina before the two went along with Kenichi Hyuga to the southern borders of the Fire Country. Minato, what's wrong? Why did you bring me here so suddenly? Minato actually did not explain anything to Kushina before bringing her to the borders. Kushina, this Hyuga ninja had discovered the existence of a suspected bijou while on patrol. The Hokage-sama asked me to investigate the matter with you. Minato explained. A bijou? With how many tails? When Kushina heard of the bijou on the borders, she immediately remembered Korin. Last time, Korin and Kurama caused a massive explosion on the woods on the borders. Kushina was still feeling some guilt about that. Normally, it has one tail, but it has more chakra than the gobe. That's why we can't be sure that it's a bijou. Kushina's eyebrows rose, this was indeed Korin. Seeing Kushina's face and instantly realized that things were not so simple, it was obvious that she knew something. Kenichi looked at the two of them as they stared at each other awkwardly, and dared not say a word. The three didn't remain that way for long, and they soon rushed to where Kenichi found Korin. When on the way, Minato was worried. He deliberately slowed down and tried to ask Kushina about the matter. Kushina, do you know anything? He asked. She did not answer. On one hand, Ryo never allowed her to talk about Korin's situation, and on the other, she just couldn't lie to Minato. Her only option was silence. Minato could see that Kushina was torn. Since he didn't want to embarrass her, he did not ask further questions. The three continued their path. Finally, a few minutes later, they were stopped by Kenichi, who pointed into the woods and said, Minato-sama, the bijou-like creature was there. Minato immediately flickered in swiftly with the Hyuga ninja. He quietly observed the surrounding woods and found the traces of a massive creature. From the damage that the woods received just by the creature's presence, he estimated that it should be the size of a bijou. Kushina followed Minato, and Kurama perceived Korin's chakra. It seems that the kid's bijou has something good lately. Her chakra is so much stronger than before. Kurama said to Kushina. Well, Ryo did kill the Rokubi's Jinchuriki. Perhaps it's the Rokubi's chakra. Kushina said after some thought. Not just that. She had Yang chakra now. I guess the kid actually had even got the Hakubi's chakra. No. That's impossible. The Hakubi is in the Cloud Village now. How would Ryo be able to do that? Kushina was in disbelief. Who know? All I can say, the kid's bijou has so much Yang chakra that I'm sure she had access to the Gobi's chakra. As Kurama and Kushina were talking, Minato also noticed this chakra. As he was about to collect the traces he found, a thunderbolt flickered before his eyes. It went past him, and then jumped directly in front of Kenichi. As soon as he saw it, Minato flickered to Kenichi using a flying thunder god mark he left on him. However, the figure wrapped in lightning chakra did not dodge him, and it stared at Kenichi without budging. Kenichi's expression became stiff in an instant, and his eyes turned hollow. At the same time, Minato's kunai touched the figure's throat. However, what surprised Minato was that the figure still had no reaction, even with Minato's kunai seemingly going through the skin. Enai-san, how cruel! Going straight for the kill. Moved back, Ryo left his ice lightning chakra mode. Minato, finding out it was Ryo, became even more concerned. Ryo, are you okay? I'm fine. Here. Ryo raised his head, exposing his unscathed neck. After confirming that Ryo was okay, Minato pointed at Kenichi and asked with dull look, Ryo, what's going on? I used genjutsu on him. I have things I want to tell you, and I don't want him to hear them. Let go to Ne-san's side now. Minato had his doubts, but didn't question much, teleporting with Ryo to Kushina. Ne-san, what I am about to tell you is my biggest secret. Please be sure to keep it between us. Ryo raised his arms with Korin in them in her ragdoll cat form. Chapter 197, Minato's Supporters. Ryo placed Korin on the ground as she peeked curiously at Minato. Just how fast could a man be? Minato was the first one she ever witnessed who was even faster than Ryo. Korin, come to Ne-san. Kushina had no boundaries in dealing with Korin, and she opened her arms wide for her. During the time both spent in the Wind Country, the two got very familiar to each other. As soon as Korin heard Kushina's call, she jumped into her arms. Korin twisted around in Kushina's arms, looking for a comfortable position, and her small front paws ended up on her chest. Minato's face changed, and he, already having a hunch that Korin is rather intelligent, said a low voice, Ryo, what's the gender of your cat? Korin is a girl. Why did you suddenly ask me that question? Ryo didn't pay attention to Korin's paw, and was oblivious to Minato's concerns. Ryo's answer relieved Minato, and he just said calmly, it's just that your cat is so cute. So I wanted to know. Cute? I think you've been deceived by her appearance, Ne-san. Ryo said with a smile. Confused by her appearance? What do you mean? Minato looked back at the cat, and felt that she looked very harmless. Therefore, he was puzzled by Ryo's words. While Minato was not a sensor ninja, he was very sensitive to chakra compared to ordinary ninja. That, along with his fighting experience, made his judgment of threat levels very accurate. He could only sense weak chakra fluctuations from Korin's body, ones that shouldn't pose a threat at all. Korin, show Minato Ne-san. Ryo did not answer directly, and turned to Korin, who nodded and jumped from Kushina's arms, running into the woods dozens of meters away. Begin. As soon as Ryo said that, Korin began to regain her chakra from within his seal. In the blink of an eye, a small mountain-sized beast appeared out of thin air. Minato looked at the behemoth in awe. Did that cat just turn into the suspected Biju that the Hokage had detected? Ryo nodded saying, yes, he must have spotted Korin. Minato couldn't even speak for a while, but being the man about to become Hokage soon, he was capable of easily holding back his emotions. Ryo, what is she? What's going on? It wasn't until Ryo told Minato of what he had previously told Kushina that he finally understood. Ryo, is she still a Biju? Minato pointed at Korin. She is a different life form, but her power and chakra are that of a Biju. So that's the case. Well then, why did you keep it a secret? Why didn't you tell the Hokage? Minato went on to ask. You don't know why, Ne-san? Don't you trust me and Ne-san? Ryo asked. Ryo, that's actually really smart of you. Thank you. The conversation between Minato and Ryo was rather mystical to Kushina. She understood every single word they said, but nothing at all. Hey! What are you guys talking about? She asked directly. Minato smiled and said, he talking about what will happen after I become the Hokage. Kushina had some doubts listening to him. After becoming Hokage? You are strong enough to protect Konoha, and that enough. It's not that simple. Ne-san, think about the three Hokages who were before Ne-san. The first and the second had the Senju clan supporting them, while the third has the Sarutobi clan as well. The three are born to big ninja clans, that represent some the highest tier forces in Konoha. Ninja clan? Are you saying that Minato being of civilian roots could hinder his status as Hokage? Kushina, while not too thoughtful, was not dumb. She quickly understood the matter. Yes. Each of the previous Hokages have their clan behind. The Senju clan was actually able to overpower the Uchiha. Ryo took a small break then continued, while the Sarutobi clan are not as strong as the Uchiha, they actually have very strong ties to the many small and medium-sized clans around Konoha. Therefore, all three Hokage could rule and have weight to their word. Minato has no clan support, so does that mean that his chances of success as Hokage are doomed? Kushina went straight to the point. Ryo nodded and said, it should have been that way. But now things are different. Ne-san, how did you get the support of the Hokage and the Uchiha? Minato did not hide his methods from the two, the Hokage were not satisfied with the growth of the Sarutobi clan, so they supported me over the Hokage's disciple. I actually had the Uchiha's support through a deal I made with Fugaku. I promised him that his clan would return to the center of the village after I become a Hokage. So that's the case. I've been wondering why you were so calm during the elections, and it turned out you already had support and never said anything, leaving me to worry. Kushina was rather dissatisfied. Sorry. It was my bad. Minato scratched his head and then apologized. Instead of continuing to argue, Kushina continued to ask, so why did you thank Ryo? It's because him telling me, not the Hokage, his biggest secret, means that the Inoshikacho are giving me their support. Am I right, Ryo? Well, that's the outcome of the discussions between the three clans. Ryo nodded. Ryo, didn't your clan always have good relationships with the Sarutobi clan? Why did things suddenly changed? Kushina had some doubts. Well, with the third in position, the Sarutobi clan had been developing too fast, turning the smaller clans into just extensions of their own. The Inoshikacho alliance is no inferior to the Sarutobi clan, so they're taking the opportunity of Nissan's rising to draw a clean line to maintain the current balance in the village. Ryo answered. Minato was glad, as Ryo gave him more support that he needed. Now, Minato has the Uchiha, the Hokage, and the Inoshikacho alliance backing him up, along with most of the ninjas of civilian origins in the village. Thus, he already had the support of most of the village. Minato Nissan, I have forgotten to ask you, will Jiraiya-san show his support to you after you become Hokage? I've asked Sensei, but he did not give me a positive answer. He said that he will just support Konoha. Minato said with a smile. Ryo also laughed, that's just like Jiraiya-san. After the conversation, Ryo let Korin return to her cat form, and then lifted his genjutsu off of Kenichi. As he woke up, he stared at the surroundings, still stunned. When he saw Minato and Kushina still searching, he just thought he got distracted, and immediately continued his search for the Biju he saw before. Chapter 198, Mokuton Reproduction Plan. After his conversation with Minato and Kushina, Ryo moved back to Konoha, and left Minato behind to cover his traces. Of course, their search was in vain and they found nothing. In the 3RDS office, the Hokage and Jiraiya were waiting for Minato's investigation results. Old man, you said a Biju was found there before as well. Well, before, a portion of the forest on the southern borders was destroyed with a Biju Dama. With news of the Rokubai Jinchuriki leaving the mist, I suspected it was him, and sent Ryo and Kushina to investigate. The third told Jiraiya about what happened back then. Old man, it seems that this Biju is definitely different. The Rokubai Jinchuriki had been killed in the Wind Country. Jiraiya's tone became serious. The third nodded in agreement, and he was also very worried. At the time, Minato's wedding was approaching. With borders of the country facing such great danger, they couldn't do anything but wait for Minato to come back. After Minato's group found nothing, they returned to Konoha, and went straight to the 3RDS office. Knock knock. As the third and Jiraiya were very anxious, they heard the knocking on the door. Come in. The third realized it was Minato who just came back. As Minato entered through the door, the third couldn't wait to ask him about what he found. Minato did not answer for a while, and then said calmly, Hokage-sama, the southern borders do have indeed some massive creatures, but this one is definitely no Biju. Hearing that, the third was secretly relieved and asked, how do you know this? What did you find? First, I found the damage that the creature had left on the threes. From that, I could estimate that the creature should be similar in size to a Biju. However, the chakra traces it left behind is definitely not that of a Biju. As he said that, Minato took out a scroll that had Korin's chakra within it, giving it to the third, who opened it and perceived it. On the other side of the office, Jiraiya, who was very sensitive to natural energy, immediately sensed it as the scroll was opened. Moreover, he immediately realized that the natural energy was perfectly integrated within this chakra. This reminded him of the two great sage toads, Fukazaku and Shima. Although the third did not practice sage mode, he was also somewhat familiar with natural energy, and it did not take him long to identify it. Indeed, this chakra is not that of a Biju. The third also nodded. Well, this reminds me two great sage toads from Mount Myaboku. This is likely to be a special summoned beast, one that we've never encountered before. Jiraiya said his conclusion. T/N, Jiraiya concluded that probably because this creature's chakra levels were way above those of any other summoned beast known to him. Minato, do you agree? The third asked. Yes, Hokage-sama. Well, since you both agree, this must be indeed a summoned beast. The third agreed with the assessment of the two who had more expertise with natural energy. I don't know if it's possible, but is there a way to come into contact with this beast? If you can become their contractor, it would be a great thing for Konoha. The third said to Minato. Hokage-sama, I am afraid it's impossible right now. We are too late, and all traces of space-time fluctuations on the borders have disappeared. Minato answered. The third had some regret about the missed opportunity. Next, he announced this matter as an S-class secret of Konoha, and at the same time rewarded everyone present. Kenichi, you've done a great job. Your report and subsequent search with Minato are of the value of an A-rank mission. You will have the reward for that, and you can collect it later. Kenichi was very happy. He was just a Takubesta Jonin, and A-rank mission rewards were great income for him. What about me? Kushina, who had been keeping her head down, couldn't sit still anymore when hearing about money. Since she was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, big missions were a rare thing for her and she didn't get much income. Same goes for you as well. The third said generously. Hearing that, Kushina was very satisfied, and went along with Kenichi to collect the money. On Ryo's side, as soon as reached the village, he teleported to Orochimaru's lab. This time however, he happened to bump into Danzo who also came to find the Sunin. Danzo saw Ryo's sudden appearance and his face turned rather gloomy. Since Ryo teleported in, he must be visiting Orochimaru's lab quite often. Danzo never knew about that. Orochimaru, what's with that? Danzo pointed at Ryo. Danzo, I'm the one to ask that question. Ryo said that, unleashing his chakra deliberately toward Danzo. A thin layer of sweat appeared on the councilman's forehead, but by reminding himself of his new arm that's made out of Hashirama's cells, he managed to keep himself calm on the surface. At the same time, Ryo established a telepathic link with Orochimaru in secret, and the two discussed how to deal with Danzo. After they agreed quickly to a good plan, Orochimaru interfered to stop Ryo. Ryo-kun, just like you, Danzo-san has business with me. He does not know of my business, does he? Ryo increased his chakra's pressure as he asked Orochimaru. Absolutely not. Ryo-kun, please believe me. Orochimaru said quickly. Ryo dubiously said, if he ever knows about my business, I'll finish you with my own hands. Ryo then pulled back his pressure, and took a seat on a chair. With him pulling back his chakra, Danzo was finally able to breathe. Originally, he had thought that Ryo was comparable to the Sunin before the Third Shinobi Third War. However, now he knew from Ryo's pre-assure that he was already stronger, and even comparable to Sakumo. The only two stronger than him in Konoha at that time must be Minato and Hiruzen. Danzo-san, you also rest assured, I haven't said anything about you to Ryo-kun. Orochimaru's words interrupted Danzo's thoughts. He was vastly overpowered in this situation, and he could only take Orochimaru's word. Orochimaru, get him out now. We have to finish our business. Ryo-kun, please come later, and we will talk. Ryo knew that he shouldn't overdo the act, and he disappeared immediately from the lab, only returning when Danzo left. Orochi-san, what brought that old fart to you? Ryo was a bit curious. Danzo is really bold. He wants to reproduce Mokiton by transplanting the 1st chakra to children. Orochimaru actually sounded rather excited. Ryo's shock appeared on his face. It was because of that incident in the manga that Orochimaru defected and Yamato was born. Chapter 199, Genjutsu Teacher. Orochi-san, haven't you agreed? Ryo tried to ask. I did, but I also want to see the legendary wood release with my own eyes. Orochimaru licked his lips excitedly. Ryo did not know what to say for a while. Orochimaru was once again making the same choice. Things were clear to both of them. In order to create a wood release using ninja, Orochimaru had to conduct human experiments, and that went against the 3 RDS principles. After a good while, Ryo asked Orochimaru, Orochi-san, what is Konoha to you? Konoha? Probably a tree that had been decaying, but now is regrowing through its new buds that are emerging. Orochimaru sounded uncharacteristically affectionate. Since tree is being revived, why would its bird want to leave? It's because a bird belong in the sky outside. Orochimaru sighed, his tone was heavy but he was determined. Ryo did not answer. Orochimaru's thoughts were already very clear. As a friend, he could only support him in his own way. Therefore, Ryo suggested joining Orochimaru in these experiments. Orochimaru very happily agreed. After discussing some details concerning the experiments, Ryo remembered the purpose behind his arrival. Orochi-san, I've actually come here for something. What is it? Orochi-san, I've heard Shinku Yui used to be your subordinate. Could you introduce me to him? Indeed, he was. Why do you want that? Orochimaru had some doubts in his voice. It's because of this. Ryo took off his contact lenses and pointed at his Mangekyo. After activating the Mangekyo, I've realized that I was still not proficient enough in using my Sharingan. My Mangekyo ability has a lot to do with Genjutsu. I also am interested with learning new Genjutsu. So I wanted to ask him. Hearing that, Orochimaru nodded, and immediately left the lab with Ryo. Shinku Yui was an instructor that oversees the training of Genin and Chunin level shinobi in the village. He himself was Jonin tier. In fact, it was never stated in the manga that he was proficient with Genjutsu. It's just that his daughter Kurane was so proficient with it, that Ryo thought her dad might have something to do with that. Kurane was indeed a Genjutsu prodigy. Although she had no Genjutsu-related Kekii Genkai, she was able to compete with many Sharingan users. Orochimaru went all the way to Shinku's place along with Ryo. Since the village was just out of war, there weren't new students graduating. Shinku wasn't busy, and was home with his daughter. Orochimaru knocked on the door, which was opened by none other than Ryo's old classmate, Kurane. Kurane, long time no see. Ryo took the initiative to say hello to his classmate. She looked at him, rather puzzled, then bowed her head, trying to speculate who he was. After a long awkward silence, she said embarrassedly, "Who are you?" Ryo's face became a little gloomy. Indeed, many of his old classmates were recognizing him. In fact, it was all his doing. Back in the day, he used to always send shadow clones to the academy. After he started working at Konoha's hospital, he stopping bothering to even do that. That, along with the years that had passed since his graduation, meant that it would only be natural for her not to recognize him. "I'm Ryo Yamanaka, your classmate from the academy." "Ah. It's you. The one who's always first to sleep." Although she did not remember how Ryo looked like, his actions seemed to leave quite the impression on Kurane. Cough. No need to mention that bit. It seems like in the academy, you were a bit more like Jiraiya. On the other side, Orochimaru couldn't help but laugh when seeing Ryo so embarrassed. Kurane did not look up at Orochimaru until then, and she was shocked when she did. Orochimaru-san, are you here for my father? Sorry for letting you wait for so long." She immediately opened the door wide open, nervously apologizing. "Don't worry about it. Just take us in," he answered. She nodded, and immediately entered the house with the two. "Father, Orochimaru-san is here." As soon as she entered the house, she shouted to her father. Hearing his daughter's voice, Shinku immediately ran out of the back room. When he saw Orochimaru, he said with a smile on his face, "Orochimaru, long time no see." The two obviously had a great relationship. The conversation between them did not sound so formal, they were friendlier as they greeted each other. Then, the two went with Ryo into the inner room and started chatting. As they were talking on the side, Ryo looked at Shinku. He had some similarities to his daughter, sharing her same eyes. The two were not talking of anything interesting to Kurane, so she asked Ryo, "Ryo, are you the same Yamanaka who was a Hokage candidate not too long ago?" Ryo had nothing to hide, and nodded. "Wow! You are that Ryo Yamanaka, the hero from the battlefield." It wasn't just a name coincidence. Kurane suddenly realized, she was talking so casually to someone of such status, so she remained silent for a while, not knowing how to act. In order to break the ice, Ryo decided to tease her a little bit. "Kurane, is Asuma still following you around? I remember before, he used to." "Stop please." Hearing Asuma's name, Kurane's face became red, but all the pressure she was feeling in Ryo's presence was gone. "Ryo-kun, come over here." Ryo still wanted to tease her more, but he heard Orochimaru calling him. Ryo stood up and walked over to him, as Shinku watched him approaching. In fact, he was embarrassed. Ryo was his daughter's classmate, but far stronger than he was. Ryo realized this, so he tried to soften the mood. "Shinku-san, hello. I'm Kurene's old classmate from the academy." Hearing Ryo be the one to speak first, and address him formally, Shinku was surprised, but then he smiled. Power was the thing most respected in their world. Someone at Ryo's level certainly doesn't need to address him so formally, but Ryo just introduced himself as an academy student, of his daughter's tier. This humbleness made Shinku realize that it was going to be easy to get along with him. Ryo was thinking that it was Shinku who was about to be the teacher among the two. On top of that, he was of his father's status, being the father of his classmate. It was only common sense for him to address him that way. After that, the two chatted for a while, and Shinku very happily agreed to help Ryo with learning Jinjutsu, and they decided to meet up the following day at the third training ground. Chapter 200, The Plan Begins. Early the next morning, Shinku arrived with his daughter, and Asuma, who was thinking he was well hidden behind them. "Shinku-san, Kurene, good morning." Ryo saluted the two happily, and they did so as well. "Ryo, you usually practice here?" Before her father was able to talk, Kurene asked Ryo. This question made him realize that, ever since he came to this world, he had been mostly practicing in the third training ground. This relatively small area was witness to most of his growth. After he chatted with the two for a while, Kakashi, Shisui, and Kushina also arrived. Kakashi was especially called by Ryo, as it was fitting for him to come see his old classmates. Ryo was about to introduce everyone, when he suddenly noticed the one lurking outside. He smiled and said to Kurene, "Do you want to invite the one outside?" Her face turned red, just like Hinata used to do around Naruto. As she did not respond, Ryo just disappeared in front of everyone, just to reappear after a few seconds with Asuma. His face had been gloomy all morning, as he thought that his Yamanaka classmate was stealing his girl. Whenever she laughed or smiled when talking to Ryo, he felt dying. His love to Kurene was no secret. Even Kakashi, who never cares for gossip, knew all too well about it. Ryo introduced Kurene to everyone, mainly to Kakashi and Shisui. Kushina had nothing to do with Kurene or her father. "Sensei, who is he?" Shisui pointed at Asuma, who was whispering to Kurene. "His name is Asuma, he's just some pervert." The one who answered was Kakashi, whose pale eyes were full of contempt. His voice was not low either, and Asuma heard him easily. "Hey! What do you mean by that, Kakashi? Do you want to fight?" Kakashi glanced at Asuma with disdain, without saying a word. At this time in the manga, Kakashi was already Jonin tier. With Ryo using Hashirama's cells to fully integrate the Sharingan with his body, he became even more powerful. Now he was around the level of a Quasi-Kage, while Asuma was just Takubutsu Jonin tier. A true battle between the two would spell Asuma's death. In fact, if this happened normally, Asuma wouldn't have complained. But now that he was belittled before Kurene, he wasn't going to just let it pass. He tried to provoke Kakashi, and the result was self-evident. Kakashi had no mercy, bringing him down immediately. "You two stop making trouble," said Kushina. Ryo turned a blind eye to their quarreling, and Kushina had to interfere before Asuma got devastated. Ryo ignored the two, saying to Shinku, "Shinku-san, my disciple is very talented in Genjutsu, do you mind if he would practice with me?" Indeed, Shisui was known in the manga mainly for his body flicker and Genjutsu. Even his Mangekyo ability was arguably the strongest Genjutsu, Koda Amatsu Kami. Ryo's own Genjutsu abilities were still underdeveloped, and Kushina never even bothered to learn one. Therefore, Shisui's only source of knowledge about Genjutsu was his clan. Shinku looked at Shisui and nodded, "This child is an Uchiha, so I don't think he'll need me to teach him any techniques. All I can offer to him is teaching about Genjutsu's application." Having Shinku's permission, Ryo took Shisui. The two went to the side with Shinku. The young Uchiha was very excited to finally find someone new to teach him about Genjutsu. At the beginning, Shinku started with the basics, explaining to them what Genjutsu is. Genjutsu refers to a way of attacking people mentally. Through various mediums, one could control the chakra flow of a target's cerebral nervous system, making his mind produce several illusions. Ryo already knew such basics, but he and Shisui were both very focused listening to Shinku. However, as the latter was speaking, Ryo's consciousness was becoming less and less clear, and by the time he realized that something was wrong, he found himself helpless, falling in a deep sleep. "Ryo! Wake up!" While he was under Genjutsu, Korin was not. She was able to awaken him. With that, he opened his eyes immediately and looked around. At first glance, he saw Shinku who was looking at him in shock, while Shisui was by his side, still unconscious. Ryo was in cold sweat, and did not know how he fell to the genjutsu. Ryo, I really never thought you'd be so mentally strong. True to your reputation as the genius of your clan. The thing that was strong was your genjutsu. When and how did it happen? Ryo asked with surprise. Well, you two were too focused on understanding me. This distracted you mental power from protecting your minds, and opened a window for me. Shinku explained. This lesson was the first of many others he received from Shinku. Over the course of the following days, he learned many techniques from him. Because of his immense mental power and his Sharingan, they were not hard for him to learn. Those who don't have a Kekkei Genkai such as the Sharingan have to get creative with their applications of genjutsu. Ryo's purpose was to expand his repertoire of techniques and tricks and then adapt that with his Sharingan, thus improving his proficiency in using it. With Shinku's knowledge and great teaching abilities, Ryo was improving very quickly, and became able to use his Sharingan's genjutsu more intuitively and frequently. This way, his study of genjutsu came to an end, as Shinku had nothing left to teach him. However, the latter still came to the third training ground every day to guide Shisui. Kurane also followed her father to the training ground daily. Ryo taught her how to improve her body flicker, as thanks to her father for teaching him. After Asuma was beat by Kakashi last time, he wasn't seen around again. After all, he lost face before his beloved girl, and couldn't just show his face again. What Ryo was most concerned about however was Kakashi, as he should go to track Rin at any moment. She had to die by his hands, so that a new Mangekyo would be born. 10 days passed since Ryo left the mist. He anticipated that Kakashi would go after Rin within 2 days. Indeed, Kakashi found out that she was missing.